Hello everyone. I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable and relax. Story 1. They begged us to keep them awake. The elevator groaned as it sank below the desert like a coffin lowering into sand. The air changed around us, going colder and flatter the deeper we went, until even my breath felt engineered. On the surface the sun had been a white coin in a rinsed sky. Down here, it was fluorescent and buzzing and humming, stitched into the ceiling like a row of surgical staples. I pressed my badge to the final turnstile and watched the red light hesitate, then flick green. The door unsealed with a rubbery gasp. "Morning, Dr. Hale," said Alvarez from inside the control room. He hadn't slept. His hair frayed at the edges, the way paper frays when it's been thumbed too long. "You're late." "Traffic," I said. The joke died on the glass. Beyond us, through the observation window, the chamber sat like a second skull. Reinforced walls. Double-pane viewport. Vents stitched high along the ceiling, each with its own adjustable baffle. A constant, whispering hiss slipped from them, our miracle gas, measured to the microgram by a lattice of valves and sensors that blinked in icy blues. The 5 volunteers were stretched across their cots, awake, wired, jittering with the shimmer of the stimulant. Day 2, and they still joked. They still smiled. They didn't know the smile would be the first thing to go. "Vitals?" I asked. "Elevated but within protocol," Alvarez said. "No REM signatures detected. Alpha activity is thinning. They're adapting." Adapting wasn't the right word. The right word lived behind a door I'd promised myself not to open. I touched the microphone and heard my own breath arrive late in the chamber, as if it had to walk farther than the rest of me. "Good morning," I said. "How's everyone feeling?" A chorus of answers. Morgan, 33, barista, eyes too kind for this place, said, buzzing, "Doc." He wiggled his fingers. Like I could peel coins off the air. Fisher, ex-Army, laughed. "I could run a marathon right here." Tate, a grad student whose thesis on sleep architecture had gotten her recruited, stared at the vents. She had not answered me once without glancing at the vents. "It's cold," she said. "Weird cold. Like it's not in the room, it's in the bones." "Any nausea? Headache?" I asked. "Just hungry," said Boone, a mechanic with hands like mallets. He was the one who could break this glass if the math was wrong. He smiled at me and I tried to see if his smile reached his eyes. "Hungry all the time now." "You're eating," I said. "Not for food," Boone said softly, and then he laughed, as if the sentence had slipped out of him from somewhere else. Marlowe sat on the edge of his cot with his eyes closed. He had the face of a choir boy after a funeral. "We're doing fine," he said, the way someone might say we're not lost yet. "Just keep talking to us, Doctor." We weren't allowed to tell them the truth. The truth had been stamped into my onboarding forms: you will not disclose the term continuation. You will not disclose that this protocol had a date on a file from 1954. You will not disclose that the first facility had welded its doors shut from the outside. "Stay engaged," Command told us. "Keep them stimulated. Distracted. Awake." By day 3, the joke started bending. Boone lectured the camera for 20 minutes on the mathematics of blinking. "It's theft," he said. "Blinking is theft. Time thieves, little lids chopping hours into scraps. Stop blinking. Stop." The others laughed, and then they stopped laughing, and then they stared. On day 4, the feeds glitched for the first time. Not the feeds in our control room. Those were the color monitors, window clean, crisp as ice. The black and white wall of archival cameras, the redundant eyes stitched into the rooms and hallways of the entire complex, stuttered and smeared. A woman's silhouette stood at the end of corridor H, not moving. When Alvarez tapped the glass to mark the monitor, her head turned a quarter inch. "You saw that," he said. "I saw static," I answered. It was easier to lie in a room full of machines. At 3:11, Tate lurched to her feet and pressed both palms to the glass. Her irises had gone coin pale. "We need a new filter," she said. "The hiss is different." "It's the same flow," I said. "Same composition." Her breath fogged the glass, then cleared, then fogged again, but slower, like she was breathing somewhere else and her body had to catch up. When I almost doze, there's a pressure. I can feel something, like a hand on the back of my neck, pushing. Not down. Through. Through what? She tilted her head, listening to something I couldn't hear. Not what, where. I made a note in the log. The word I wrote was threshold. My pen dug a little tear in the page where it hesitated. We upped the enrichment protocol. Music in irregular time signatures. Arithmetic tasks. Story prompts. Nothing with lullabies. Nothing with the sea. I read aloud from the manual like it mattered, like my voice could build a wall around them. Stay awake, stay with me. By day 5, sleep wasn't the enemy. The approach to it was. Morgan began to cry in these tiny, tremulous sobs that he tried to hide in the crease of his elbow. "Every time I get close," he whispered, "they notice. They crowd around. Like kids at a zoo. They put their fingers on the glass." "Who is they?" I asked. He nodded at the vents. "The ones on the other side." Alvarez muted the mic and hissed, "We can't let this spiral." I looked at the control room mirror, our reflection 2 seconds out of sync. My mouth moved, the reflected mouth finished the sentence I had not yet begun. The mirror had been checked, certified, polished. I watched it anyway, and the more I watched it the more certain I was that the delay had lengthened by, no, that way lies madness. The gurney arrived at 1940. No one told us a gurney was coming. 2 men in gray carried it with a priest's gravity, nodded, and left without looking at the chamber. On it sat a metal case like a casket for a child. Alvarez did not want to open it. I did. Inside, a backup manifold. A pressure gauge wrapped in brown paper. A fresh crate of filters. And a single sheet of onion skin paper with typed instructions and a final line in ink: "If they ask for sleep, deny." "Who wrote this?" Alvarez asked. "Someone who has done this before," I said. We changed the filters. We talked about weather. We talked about baseball. We talked about anything shaped like a day with a sun in it. Boone shivered without gooseflesh. Marlowe hummed hymns at a tempo that made my heart lurch. Fisher pushed his cot an inch at a time toward the vents. "I can hear better here," he said. "They're telling jokes. They're funny if you think about them too long." On day 6, we found the first blood. It was under Tate's fingernails. "I scratched it," she said, showing us nothing. Her arms were smooth and uninjured. "The seam," she said. "Where the room is glued to the world." "There is no seam," Alvarez said into the mic, but his voice came out in the room half a second later as if it was swimming through syrup. The 5 of them looked up in precise unison. They smiled. I pretended not to notice. We were supposed to be observers. We became something else, keepers, candles, excuses. I slept for 22 minutes in a swivel chair, head back, mouth open. I fell into darkness like a coin drops into a well. In that darkness, a hand I could not see touched my sternum and pushed, not down, through, and every part of me that had touched sunlight blistered. I woke up with a sound that wasn't mine in my throat. Alvarez looked at me and shook his head, tiny, frightened. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't tell me." On day 7, Morgan stood from his cot and said, quietly, like he was embarrassed, "Doctor, we're going to need you to keep us awake." He did not blink as he said it. His eyes were glossy stones. "Please. Don't let us sleep. Tie us if you have to. Cut, whatever you need to cut, just don't let us go under, please." I felt that plea the way you feel a thunderhead rolling over you, the hair on your arms prickling, the air tasting like pennies. "You're safe," I lied. "We're here." Boone began to laugh and could not stop. He laughed until he gagged, then laughed through the gagging. Fisher pinwheeled his arms in slow, deliberate circles as if he were describing the architecture of an invisible cathedral. Tate whispered multiplication tables, but the numbers started to feel wrong, as if they were arranged in a different gravity. Marlowe tilted his head and said, "They're trying to be polite, they're trying to knock like good guests, but the door keeps opening the wrong way." "Door?" Alvarez mouthed. I looked up at the vents. The hiss never changed pitch. I told myself that. I wrote it in the log. I underlined it. The hiss never changed pitch. At 2:02, the lights dimmed. Every screen in the control room went to night vision without being told. The black and white wall of archival cameras flared in an electrical aurora. Corridors, storage, mechanical, the elevator throat, the sealed records room we never opened. Something stood in the sealed room, softly pulsing, like a shape witnessed through eyelids. Alvarez hissed my name. I could not answer. I was listening to the speaker. The hiss had changed. Just a hair. Just enough to make my molars ache. In the chamber, Morgan stood on his cot, eyes fixed on a corner where no camera pointed. "Don't," he said to the empty air. "Please don't." He put his hands over his face and sobbed through his fingers, and then, as if someone had placed their mouth against his ear and whispered instructions, he stopped crying and smiled. "Okay," he said. "Okay, but the others have to stay awake." "The others?" I asked. He nodded. "Your others." He tilted his head toward our window. "Do you know your names sound different from that side?" I muted the mic. My hands shook. "Exhale, we need to intervene," I said. "We bring them out." "We don't have authorization," Alvarez said. "We don't have a way to refill the chamber with normal air without dropping pressure." "Then we get authorization." The phone to command had gone dead somewhere between now and when we stopped being paid to be afraid. I picked it up anyway, just to feel the handle dig into my palm. The line hummed, but not like a phone. Like a throat. On day 8, Tate lost time. She would be speaking and then be somewhere else in the sentence with a little smudge of silence in between like an eraser had dragged across her words. She pressed her fingers to her eyelids and hissed through her teeth. "I can see them when I push. I can. I can." Trembling, "I can see the room we're in, but there's no light, only the edges, the outlines, like chalk lines in space, and hands, too many hands." "We need to sedate," I said. "We can't," Alvarez said. "Sedatives plus stimulant equals heart failure. You know that." "Then we turn off the gas." Alvarez stared at me like I'd suggested turning gravity off. If it's what's holding them on this side. If it's what's holding the door open, I said, then maybe. We didn't finish the argument. The glass of the observation window flexed. It didn't crack. It bowed, as if something on the other side of it had inhaled very deeply. We watched our reflections elongate and smear. My reflected eyes slid out of alignment with my skull and then snapped back. Boone stepped up to the glass on the chamber side and inhaled gently in sync, testing it, smiling with the bruised delight of a child discovering a lever. Alvarez whispered, "Christ. Don't," I said to Boone, not into the mic, just as a person says to a person when they see a switch their soul tells them not to touch. Boone giggled and tapped the glass with one knuckle. "Hollow," he said, and the word arrived in our room an instant later from the speakers, and from somewhere else, phoned in from a distance too far to imagine. By day 9, the smell started. Rust, even though there was nothing rusting. Old pennies, even though none of us carried change. A sweetness undercut with something that lived behind dumpsters. The facility had been cleaned to the bone. Spots on the floor reflected. Still, the smell moved through the ducts with a will. The volunteers sniffed the air in unison and said, together, "There you are." We called it a malfunction in the log. We called it many things so we wouldn't have to call it what it was. At 4:44, the power went out in a way that wasn't like other power going out. It felt intimate. The emergency lights stuttered themselves into a feverish red. The doors locked with a clunk I felt in my molars. The vent hiss in the chamber softened as if someone had put a finger to their lips. Alvarez swore and slapped the breaker relays until his hands bled. The alarm panel gave us nothing but a flat red eye. "Manual override," he said. "Manual override is upstairs," I said. Then we go upstairs. The elevator wouldn't come. The stairs would. We pushed the emergency bar and the stairwell swallowed our flashlight beams. Our steps were too loud in there, like we were hammering on the inside of a box. We climbed 2 flights and hit a door that should have opened. It did not. We climbed another and found the same. We listened. Something was moving below us. Not feet. A drag, a patient rustle, like a long dress. "Back," Alvarez said, voice a ribbon. "Back now." We returned to the control room with breath we didn't own. The screens were out, but the window was still the window. Inside the chamber, the 5 stood in a crooked line, watching us without blinking. Their chests rose and fell. They were smiling, not happily, but like someone was pulling the corners of their mouths with strings. I fumbled for the mic with fingers I had to drag through syrup. "Listen to me," I said. "We're ending the trial. We're going to release you. We need you to lie down. We need you to." "Don't," Morgan said softly. "Please don't. Don't put us to sleep, doctor." He stepped forward, and for a moment I thought he'd put his hand on the glass, but it drifted right past it, and he touched the frame of the window with the tenderness of a man touching a doorway to a child's room. "It's behind you." I turned because I could not turn. There was nothing behind me but the monitors, and our reflection in the dark glass, and the shape of the door, and a second door that hadn't been there, but now was, a thin seam dark as a closed eye. It was right where the record said the first facility had its emergency egress. It was flush with the wall, not a door yet but the promise of one. I blinked and it was gone. Alvarez was crying without sound. The gas hiss changed again, or maybe stopped, or maybe went somewhere else with more room to grow. In the chamber, Marlowe began to speak in a language I did not know and did not want to know. The others answered him, syllables braided, their voices not quite stacked, as if they were taking turns in slices smaller than time. Tate reached up and tugged gently at the skin on her forearm as if it were a loose thread. It stretched, not much, just enough for me to understand that meat, like stories, will go on being told if you pull the right line. "Don't," I said. "Please, don't." She smiled apologetically. "I have to make sure there's nothing for it to pull," she whispered. "It pulls when I get soft. That's when it tries to take me through." "Through where?" Alvarez said, voice small. She looked past us to the black window of the blank monitors. Her eyes shone. "Where the waking ends, but before the sleeping begins. We killed the gas. We did it because there was nothing else left to do." The manifold screamed. The chamber pressure shivered. The hiss cut off as clean as a guillotine. The silence that followed had teeth. For 4 long seconds, nothing happened. The 5 stood there breathing. Then they inhaled in unison and I felt it, a pressure pop in my ears, a sensation like stepping out of an airplane into a cavity of sky. The lights flickered back to life without warming up. The screens returned, a dozen rooms blinking into existence, each empty, each too bright. Corridor H displayed an angle no camera was wired to capture, the ceiling, the light fixture, the dust floating like snow. The sealed records room showed stacks of file boxes arranged into a shape that made my tongue ache when I tried to describe it. The mirror on the far wall returned our image, but the us in the mirror was not moving. "Alvarez," I said. "Don't look at it." He looked. Everyone always looks. Inside the chamber, Boone shuddered as if a cold hand had passed through him. "It's angry," he said. "It's hungry. We were feeding it, the space between thoughts, the soft, the almost," his eyes filled with grateful tears. "Thank you for turning it off." Morgan nodded. "Now keep us awake," he whispered. "Please. Please, doctor." I touched the mic. My finger left a print that didn't fade. "We will," I said. "We will. Stay with me. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. They counted. The numbers came wrong and right like waves. Fisher vomited and then stood there smiling with vomit on his chin because the alternative was to close his eyes. Tate sat cross-legged and pinched her thigh every time her head lowered. Marlowe prayed in a voice that sounded like someone else's throat. The hallway lights outside our room went dark one by one, a procession, coming toward us from the elevator shaft. The breath at my neck was mine, and not mine. Alvarez whispered, "Whisper, don't turn around." "I won't," I said. The last light near our door stuttered. The door handle moved. Not turned. Pressed, as if someone were very politely testing whether we had remembered to lock it. "Keep them awake," I said into the microphone, and I realized I was saying it to myself too. My eyelids had never felt so heavy, so sweet, so treacherous. I scratched my forearm like Tate and found blood under my nails, and the pain was a clean bell that kept the dark at bay for one more second, one more second. We took turns reading nonsense to them, the way parents read to children on flights to keep them from the terrible pressure of the descent. Recipes. Assembly manuals. Disaster evacuation protocols. Morgan laughed at a sentence about rotating stock and then sobbed, the sound cracking like ice. "If I sleep," he whispered, "it will learn my name. Once it knows your name, it can find your mouth from the other side." "Don't let it," I said. "Please, don't let it." The phone rang. It shouldn't have. It was dead, had been dead, would be dead again the moment we needed it. It rang anyway, each tone a little farther away than the one before it, as if the call was being walked down a long hall with a rug. Alvarez picked it up and pressed it to his ear and did not speak. His face emptied. He nodded twice. He hung up. Shaky, they said, he whispered, they said to hold. Hold what? Hold the line. The vents breathed in, slow, though we had shut them. In the chamber, the five lifted their chins at the same angle, their eyes shining with tears that did not fall. Please, Morgan said, his voice ripped thin. Please keep us awake. I pressed the talk button and my thumb trembled so hard the plastic clicked. We're here, I said. We're not going anywhere. The new door, no seam, no handle, stood in the wall again, visible only if you didn't look directly at it. The air around it blurred like heat above a road. Something knocked from the other side with impeccable courtesy. 3 soft knocks. A pause. 3 more, a rhythm you could fall asleep to if you didn't know any better. Tate screamed, sudden and bright, and clapped both hands over her ears. It's learning the cadence, she cried. It's matching our breath, it's, oh God, it's right, she stopped. She smiled the modest smile of a woman greeting a neighbor on a Sunday morning. Hello, she said to no one we could see. Marlowe, I said, sing something loud, anything. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. His lips formed a word, awake, and then his jaw locked. His eyes welled. His body vibrated like a wire between poles. He was listening to something inside his head that had hands. Don't sleep, I whispered to him, to all of them, to Alvarez, to the red emergency light, to the shadow in the mirror that lagged behind our movements by 1, 2, 3 frames now. Don't sleep, don't. For a fragment of a second, I drifted. It was no longer than a blink extended, no heavier than the pause between syllables. In that shallow slip I felt the cool of another room on my teeth. I smelled tide in a place without water. I heard the slow, delighted inhalation of something that had never had lungs until I made it the gift. I tore my nail across my forearm and the sting dragged me back up. Alvarez was pale as wax. Not much longer, he breathed, whether to comfort me or himself, I don't know. What happens then? I asked. He glanced at the door that wasn't a door. He swallowed. Flat, either it stops knocking, or we stop answering. Inside the chamber, Morgan pressed his forehead to the glass and spoke without moving his lips. If you rest, doctor, it will know the shape of your breath. It will come when you are too tired to say no. His eyes begged with a warmth so human it almost broke me. Please, keep us awake. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. I began to recite the longest sequence of numbers I could remember. Fisher joined me. Boone hummed. Tate pinched her leg until her skin went plum dark. Marlowe's pupils widened until his eyes were black pools with white shores. The phone rang again, farther, then closer, then right beside my ear without moving. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I already knew what it would say. Hold. So we held. We held the line between breath and breath, between sentence and sentence, between the chamber and the place that pressed its face to our glass. We held while the lights pulsed and the door almost decided to be real and the mirror fell one more frame behind. We held while the five pleaded with gratitude so raw it made me want to sleep out of spite, out of surrender, out of the sweet relief of not being the one who says no. Somewhere above us, the desert turned its cheek to another sliver of sun. Down here, the hiss of the vents resumed as softly as a blade entering water. In the chamber, the five sagged in perfect unison like marionettes whose strings had been loosened. The smell faded by a hair. The door stain softened until it was only paint. Alvarez laughed once, high and small, and put both palms flat on the console to keep from falling. "They fixed it," he said. He didn't sound relieved. He sounded like a man who has been told his sentence is not death but life. Morgan lifted his head. He looked at me, not the window, not the mirror, not the door. Me. "Please," he whispered, every syllable a little cut. "Keep us awake." I pressed the talk button and felt the mic tremble under my thumb. "We will," I said. "We will, we will." The phone didn't ring. The door didn't knock. The mirror caught up by half a frame. The chamber breathed. We breathed back. Outside the complex, the desert wind shifted, and no one noticed. Inside, we waited for a permission we could not trust. I wrote in the log with a hand I barely recognized, "Subjects responsive. Gas restored. Continue engagement." And then, because I could not help myself, I added a line that did not belong in any protocol. "If they ask for sleep, deny." I signed it. I put the pen down. I stared through the glass at 5 faces shining with a terrible, grateful hope. I listened to the vents, to the thin line where the waking ends and the sleeping begins, to the place with hands that waits on the other side, and I promised them I would keep them awake. I promised them, and I promised myself, and I started to count again. 1, 2, 3. Story 2. The file that wants to be shared. The subject line was empty. No preview text. Just a timestamp and an attachment named share_me.jpg. I stared at it too long. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Soft, it was 3:17 a.m., the hour when walls seem thinner and apartments remember every footstep they've ever swallowed. My coffee had gone cold. The newsroom CMS was still open, that unfinished article about a neighborhood data breach glowing on my second monitor. Outside, somewhere down the block, a night bus sighed at a stoplight and moved on. I should have flagged it as spam. I should have closed the laptop and gone to bed. Instead, I clicked. The picture opened with a soft electronic sigh. At first, the image looked like static resolved into a dimly lit hallway. The wallpaper was peeling in vertical strips. A light at the end flickered. On the left, a door stood ajar. Inside that slice of darkness was something pale. A hand. Fingertips pressed against the edge of the door as though whoever owned them was afraid to be seen and hungrier to be noticed. I leaned closer. Whisper, the wallpaper pattern, lilies. My mother's old house had lilies. The thought struck like a cold needle. My mother died when I was 19. That hallway belonged to a place I promised myself I'd never stand in again. I closed the image. My reflection in the black screen looked wrong. Eyes too wide, mouth slightly open as if someone had called my name. I saved the file for later analysis out of habit. I renamed it, because a name like share_me.jpg felt like a dare. I tried to get back to work. The CMS froze. Then my phone dinged. Then the printer I barely used thrummed to life and spit out a page with a hush of warm paper. I hadn't printed anything. On the paper was the same hallway. The door was open wider. Shaky, a sliver of a face peeked around the edge, an angle of cheekbone and a human eye that didn't blink. The printer gulped and fed another page. The second print showed my bedroom, lit only by the laptop, taken from the foot of my bed. The angle was wrong. It was as if the air had eyes. I unplugged the printer. It kept printing for a moment after, like something finishing a thought. Then it died. The apartment fell into a silence that wasn't silence. Whisper, share it, share it. The phrase came like the faintest interference, like the hiss of a radio under a pillow. I pressed a palm to my sternum. My heart tried to leave. I deleted the file. Emptied the trash. Cleared caches. I even powered everything down and sat on the edge of the bed with my hands locked together, calm, breathing on purpose like my therapist taught me. The silence throbbed. I slept with the lights on. The first nightmare replayed like a home movie I couldn't pause. I was back in my mother's house. The lilies on the wallpaper stank of sugar and dirt. I moved toward the end of the hallway, toward a door I remembered because we never opened it when she was alive. The knob was cold. I could see my breath. I heard her voice from inside, not my mother as I knew her, but her voice slowed down, pitched low, like a recording dragged underwater. Share it. When I woke, my phone was warm under my pillow. The screen was open to messages. A text conversation had populated with contacts I hadn't touched in months. The last message from my ex glowed at the bottom, a blue bubble with a gray paperclip. Share_me.jpg. I didn't send it. I didn't. Panic, my hands shook as I thumbed through settings. The message timestamp was 3:17 a.m. I called her. Straight to voicemail. It's me. Don't open anything from me. Delete it. If you already opened it, call me back right now. I scrubbed, and scrubbed, and scrubbed. New profile passwords. 2-factor. I even bought a cheap burner phone on my way to the office. It didn't matter. By lunch, share_me.jpg sat in the burner's photo roll like it had always lived there. At my desk, I whispered to my friend Luis, the IT guy who never judged my paranoia. He laughed until I showed him my camera roll. The laughter stopped, the way laughter does when you stand up too fast and see stars. Okay, he said. Okay. This is probably a Trojan piggybacking across your cloud. Or a prank. Let me take it. He moved the file to an isolated laptop not tied to any network. He slid headphones on and pulled the laptop close like a plate of food. Don't be dramatic, he said when I asked him to be careful. He clicked. I watched the color drain from his face like someone pulled a stopper. He took off the headphones and rubbed his forearms as if the room had grown cold. That's not funny, he said. What did you see? Luis swallowed. Lo, my sister's accident scene. But, not the picture they showed me when I had to identify her. It was like the 3 seconds before it, and she looked right at me like she could see the camera. We didn't talk for a minute. The newsroom buzzed around us, the hum of fluorescent lights, phones ringing, the clatter of a rolling chair. Whisper, under it all, a thin voice like static, share it. You should delete it, I said. I tried. He turned the laptop to show a progress bar stuck at 99%. It won't complete. I think it spawned a copy in temp. He cleared his throat. I'll sandbox this. I'll call you later. He didn't call. By evening, the newsroom chat lit with a message from our managing editor that Luis had left for the day, not feeling well. I went home through a city that looked slightly on tilt, as if a horizon line in my head had shifted without me. In the elevator, I watched the security camera feed above the buttons. There were 2 of me in it. The other me was half a second behind, blinking slower, smiling a fraction too long. Shaky, when the doors opened, I ran. I woke at 3:17 a.m. again. Not to a sound this time, but to a pressure on the mattress, the weight of someone sitting at the end of my bed. My eyes took long seconds to focus. In the gray between blinks, I saw a shape where the mattress dipped. The laptop on my desk glowed. The file was open. The image had changed again. It showed my bedroom from the ceiling corner, a place no one could stand. The picture was so clear, so pure in its cold digital light, that I could see my own chest rise. I whispered, "What do you want?" The speakers breathed. "Whisper, share it, share it." "I won't." The pressure on the mattress increased until springs creaked. Something leaned close. For 1 second that went on forever, a breath colder than winter passed along my cheek. The air smelled faintly of burned wires and lilies. I cried without sound. When it moved away, the bed sprang lightly as if relieved. I didn't sleep again. Luis's girlfriend called me in the morning. She was crying quietly, which is always worse than loud crying. "He's not here," she said. "He left his phone. The laptop is open to a photo." She swallowed. "It keeps changing. It showed me our child's room with." "I don't want to say." "Don't look at it," I said. "Turn it off. Unplug everything." "It doesn't turn off," she said. I went over. I took the stairs because the mirrored elevator made me feel watched. Luis lived in a narrow apartment that smelled like dryer sheets and old coffee. The isolated laptop hummed on the kitchen table. The mouse moved by itself in small, patient arcs, as if it were a shark testing water. I pulled the plug from the wall. The screen stayed on. The image, their child's room, brightened as though the laptop had breathed. I took a dish towel and covered the screen. The towel fell off to the floor. The speakers hissed, "Share it, share it, share it." I said it like a prayer I didn't believe in. "I won't." Luis texted me at noon. One line. "It just wants to be shared." I called. No answer. A minute later, a photo came through. It was a close-up of Luis's face. He had the expression of someone trying to hear something from far away. His pupils were wide. In the reflection of his cornea was a tiny rectangle of a laptop screen, and within that, an even tinier reflection of his own face. The recursion made me dizzy. By dusk, the file had infected the city like weather. I watched a teenager on the subway airdrop it to everyone nearby with a grin he didn't mean. At the corner, a man who might have been homeless held up a cardboard sign that said "Share Me" in neat block letters. Monday's headlines wrote themselves. I wrote a draft. I included everything. The lilies. The printer. The breathing. I didn't send it. Every time I reached toward the publish button, a thought rose like a curtain: sharing is how it breathes. Lo, my job was oxygen. At 2:03 a.m., I gave up. I left the apartment and walked. Night hung low and heavy. Streetlights hammered small circles of safety into the dark, and the dark was patient, waiting in the spaces between. I passed a bodega with a flickering sign. In the glass door I saw my reflection. For a heartbeat he didn't move when I did. He cocked his head to the side and his smile arrived too slow. I kept walking. Somewhere near the river, I heard footsteps that weren't mine, always stopping when I stopped. A thin mechanical whine threaded the air near my ear like an old modem connecting. Whisper, the voice found me. Share it, share it. I took out the burner phone and hurled it into the dark water. It left my hand with a little burst of relief. It hit the river with a plunk too small for the size of my fear. The relief lasted one step. Then my pocket buzzed. My main phone. A new email. No subject. No body. Attachment, share_me.jpg. I laughed. It sounded like someone else's laugh. Shaky, my body felt like a room I was borrowing. I went home at dawn. The city's first buses exhaled steam and stretched their brakes. Morning made my apartment look ordinary, a place where nothing impossible could happen. The laptop waited like a pet. I didn't turn it on. I showered and sat on the edge of my bed with a towel around my waist and stared at the far wall until the damp in my hair went cold. My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a courier uniform holding a thin padded envelope. I opened the door. He pressed a signature screen at me. "Delivery for you," he said. His pupils were very large. A bead of sweat balanced on the tip of his nose and didn't fall. I didn't order anything. He shrugged. "Came from your office." He leaned in as I signed. His breath smelled faintly of burned wires. "You should share it," he said softly. I slammed the door and threw the locks. The envelope on my kitchen table felt warm. My name was written on it in block letters that tried too hard to look like a stranger's handwriting. I opened it with a butter knife. Inside was a compact disc. No label, just a hand-drawn smile in black marker. I don't own a CD player. I looked at the laptop. I looked at the CD. The laptop seemed to lean toward me. I carried the disc to the trash can and buried it under coffee grounds. The lights dimmed for a heartbeat. When they steadied, the disc lay on top of the pile, grinning up through brown grit. I called my ex again. Straight to voicemail. I left a message that was mostly breath and apology. I called my mother's number, which hasn't belonged to her in years. A man answered on the first ring and said my name as if he were waking me. "Soft, you can stop it," he said. "If it has nowhere to go." "How?" I asked. "Starve it." He hung up. I turned off the Wi-Fi. I powered down the breaker. The apartment lay in a quiet that had edges. I took the laptop and the phones into the bathtub and wrapped them in towels and then plastic and then towels again. I sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub like someone guarding a sleeping wolf. Night came. 3:17 a.m. found me anyway. The voice didn't need power. "Share it, share it, share." "No," I said, and the word wavered only once. "No." I held the cell phone in both hands, felt its smooth face and its dead weight. I thought of throwing it out the window, and then thought of the neighbor's patio where the phone might land and light up and open like a flower and breathe. I put it back in the tub and turned on the water for a second, just to hear a real sound, just to drown the whisper. The water beat against porcelain like rain on a tin roof. My shoulders dropped. I breathed. The sound almost covered the other sound. I woke to silence and gray light and the clean smell of wet ceramic. I had slept sitting up. My neck crackled. I stood and wiped condensation from the mirror. My face looked like I'd lost a fight I didn't remember. Behind me, the shower curtain swelled as if the tub was breathing. I pulled it back. The laptop bag lay where I left it. The towels around it were dry. The plastic wrap was gone. In the bottom of the tub was a single wet footprint. Dog. Not quite. The toes were too long. I locked myself in the bedroom. I pushed the dresser against the door. I texted everyone in my contacts the same message: if you get a file from me, don't open it. Please. Please. If you already did, call me now. Responses trickled in like rain through a broken gutter. LOL, what kind of chain letter is this? Already opened. Nothing there, bro. Your file is sick as hell, what the? Who is that behind your chair? I powered the phone down. I unplugged the TV. I wrapped the router in tinfoil because it made me feel like I was doing something. Lo, I opened the laptop with the care you give to a sleeping animal that you love and fear. The desktop looked unchanged. A single file sat in the middle, named simplyme.jpg. I clicked. The photo showed me at the kitchen table, hunched over a laptop. The angle was from outside the window, through the glass, through the dirt. Behind me in the picture stood a figure. It was tall. It had hands, too many. It wore a face almost like a dog's smile mapped onto the wrong bones. It leaned down and put its mouth near my ear. My mouth in the photo was open, forming an O around a silent word. I closed the laptop. I went to the window. I drew the blinds. I felt watched through the slats by something that didn't need gaps to see. Someone knocked. Soft. The old woman from the end of the hall stood there with a plate of cookies and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. I thought you could use sweetness, she said. The plate smelled like lilies. I'm allergic, I lied. Her smile widened to show too many teeth, each tooth a little too square. You should share, she whispered, and bared the plate like an offering or a trap. I shut the door. The knock came again, harder. A second voice joined, a child's, then a man's, then a chorus. Share it, share it. The knocks kept time with the chant. A fist hammered near the knob. The chain rattled. I screamed. Not words. Something raw that tore my throat. The knock stopped. The chorus went quiet, replaced by the sound of many people exhaling at once, as if relieved. I typed an email to the newsroom. This is a public safety story. We have to warn people. We have to tell them not to open it, not to send it. I attached nothing. I hovered over send until my finger trembled. Shaky, I imagined the headline going live. I imagined the attention. Attention is a form of sharing. I closed the draft. At dawn, the city's feed was different. Videos on every platform, each a few seconds long, each showing a face turned toward the camera at the last moment with a smile that looked stapled on. In the comments, the same sentence repeated in 100 languages that said the same thing in different rhythms. It just wants to be shared. I turned everything off again. I sat on the floor of the bedroom and watched light crawl up the wall. Calm can look like surrender when you run out of things to fight with. Soft, I remembered my mother's hand on the back of my neck when I was little and sick. I remembered the smell of lilies at her funeral and how the florist apologized for the expense. In the quiet, I realized the voice was wrong about one thing. It wasn't asking. It had never asked. It had always been telling. Share it. When you refuse a command long enough, it changes its shape. It becomes a question. How much do you love the people around you? How much do you love the world? Enough to starve something that feeds on it. I wrote this instead. I wrote it in a plain text editor with no smart quotes and no autosave. I wrote it without attachments. I wrote it to you, whoever you are, reading with your head tilted toward your device, with the light of your screen turning your eyes into small moons. I wrote it slow, putting pauses where your breath will catch, letting you hear what I heard, as close as I can without crossing the line the file wants me to cross. You're waiting for the image. Whisper, you're waiting for a link, a button, a picture, the smallest door through which the thing can crawl. It isn't coming from me. If the file finds you, and it will try, do not open it. Do not be brave. Do not be curious. Do not show anyone. Do not say its name out loud in a room with speakers turned on. Tape over your cameras if it helps. Unplug if it doesn't. Stand still in your home and listen to your house breathe, and remember that not all hunger deserves feeding. Someone is standing behind me again. The mattress dips, so gently. The voice in the speaker is just air now, just the idea of a voice. It says share it, like a plea this time, like it knows I'm writing the only thing it cannot use. I can't promise this will save you. I can only keep starving it for as long as I am able. If you ever see a file named share_me.jpg, remember this: sometimes mercy is refusal, sometimes love is hunger denied, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for a monster is to let it die slowly in the dark. The laptop lid is closing by itself. The screen is a thin line of light like an eye becoming a scar. The hallway outside my door smells like lilies. I am so tired. I will not share it. Story 3. The man who took my eyes while I slept. I used to love sleeping with the window cracked open. Portland nights are damp and cool, and the sounds carry just enough to make you feel like the city is breathing with you. Wind in the firs, a far-off Max train, footsteps on wet sidewalk, then everything softens and fades. It was comforting. It felt safe. It felt like nothing truly bad could happen while a whole city breathed beside me. I am writing this now because I am no longer sure my memories are purely mine. I am no longer sure my vision belongs to me. If I pause, it's because I need to touch the bones under my eyes and feel the ridges of the stitches that were supposed to be gone months ago. Slow breath, the skin healed. The ache never did. It started small. Tuesday, late spring. I woke up with my eyes burning, like I'd fallen asleep wearing contacts I don't own. I blamed the pollen. My roommate, Ken, joked that 30 was the magic number where your body starts leaking and squeaking on its own. When I rubbed my lids, something tacky flaked under my nail, dried, dark, and copper-smelling. It didn't register. A nosebleed, maybe. I showered, blinked through the steam until the sting settled into a dull throb, and went to work. That night, I stood in the bathroom and stared at my reflection too long. My pupils looked huge. The whites had a faint yellow like old paper left in a window. I told myself to stop doom-scrolling medical forums before bed. I locked the new deadbolt. I cracked the window anyway, because the city's breathing was still my lullaby. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the feeling that someone had just stepped away from my bed. Not the sound, my brain supplied the sound after the fact, as if to justify the cold rush of adrenaline flooding my chest. It was like my skin had known before my ears did. The room was a smear of gray shapes. I didn't sit up. I listened. The window clicked softly in the breeze. The refrigerator cycled. And from the corner near the closet, a breath that wasn't mine. Slow. Damp. Whisper, patient. I told myself to be rational. I reached for my phone and palmed the screen to life. The clock seared my retinas. I swung it toward the closet like a flashlight. The beam was weak, my hand shaking, jittering the light across old jackets and shoe boxes. Nothing. No one. I laughed out loud, too loud, and the sound broke something that was holding me together. I got up and shut the window. The latch was damp. My fingers smelled faintly of soil and chemicals, like the inside of a hospital janitor's closet. I locked the window. I relocked the door. I told myself the breath was mine all along. The next morning I had crust at the corners of my eyes again. It wasn't sleep. It was darker. There were two tiny, straight lines running downward from the inner corners, thin scabs, symmetrical, like a map someone had drawn on me with a scalpel. My stomach dropped so fast I had to sit on the edge of the tub. Ken knocked to ask if I was going to use all the hot water. I said I'd cut myself shaving. He laughed. Dude, you don't shave your eyeballs. We both laughed too hard, like people whistling past a graveyard. That evening, I taped the window. I pushed a chair under the doorknob. I laid a cheap motion sensor from a hardware store on the floor beside my bed. My eyes felt tired in a way that wasn't tiredness. They felt handled. I set my phone to record. I told myself I was being stupid, dramatic, paranoid. I turned off the light and tried to listen to the city's breathing. I fell asleep between two breaths. At 3:12 a.m., the motion alarm screamed. I sat bolt upright and slammed my shin into the nightstand. My phone skittered to the floor, the screen flaring. Something was between the window and the foot of my bed. Not a shape I could name. A negative space, taller than me, lean, with shoulders that seemed wrong under a dark hood, like the weight of the hood belonged to something heavier. I smell it again now as I write, metal, wet wool, antiseptic. Get out, I said, and my voice cracked. Get the hell out. It didn't move. It breathed. Pause, then, in the phone's low glow, the hood turned. The light caught a face that wasn't a face, skin the color of raw ash, smooth, almost polished. No eyes. Just two deep, perfect hollows where eyes should be. No reflection, no wet gleam, holes. Not sockets like a skull. Holes like tunnels whose end you can't see. I tried to scream and the sound that came out was the thin whistle of a kettle far away. My body did not belong to me. My legs would not push. A hand came up in the glow, pale and steady. It held a blue nitrile glove half-rolled, and I knew right then that what was about to happen to me had happened before. Calm, unhurried, the figure slid the glove on like slipping into a routine. It reached toward my face with two fingers, and the room tilted. The air tightened like plastic. Everything collapsed into that cold hand, and then it let me go. I woke to Ken pounding on my door. Daylight scalded through blinds. The alarm clock said 11:06. I shouldn't have slept that late. My phone lay face down on the rug. The motion alarm was quiet. The chair was still under the knob. The tape on the window was unbroken. I thought I'd dreamed it, and tears of relief sprang up so quickly my chest hiccuped. Then I stood and the world shifted an inch to the left. I fell to my knees, retching, palms on the floor. My vision had a lag, a tiny smear, as if everything I saw was painted half a second before I could accept it. In the bathroom, I pulled down my lower lids and dry heaved again. There were fresh sutures so fine they might have been human hair, spiderwebbing from the inner corners along the lower rim. Invisible, unless you knew to look. Unless you could feel them with the tip of a trembling finger. I cried. It burned like salt on an open nerve. At urgent care on any Broadway, the physician assistant's smile stiffened when I said my eyes hurt. She was careful with the language. Had I been in an accident? Had I undergone any procedures in the last week? Did I have a new contact brand? When she leaned in with the penlight, her breath ticked. She swallowed. You've had some irritation, she said. Maybe an allergic reaction. She prescribed antibiotic drops and printed a referral to an ophthalmologist. Her eyes flicked to the nurse. The nurse's eyes flicked to the door. I wanted to say, someone is coming into my room at night and doing something to me, but the words felt like a fragile toy I would shatter by holding up to the wrong light. I took the drops. I went home. Ken moved his mattress into the living room and joked about a slumber party we were too old to have. We watched trash TV with the lights on. Every time the building's heater clicked, we both flinched. He said he'd sit up with me. He made coffee at midnight. We pretended that made us brave. At 2, he nodded off on the sofa. At 3, my lids grew heavy. At 3:17, the power hummed in the walls like someone dragging a metal comb through the wires. The apartment's breathing changed. The city held its breath. I didn't see him at the foot of my bed this time. I felt his shadow step across my skin. My eyes tried to open wider and couldn't. The dropper's cool kiss on my lower lid sent an electric shock through my jaw. A gloved thumb pressed gently near my tear duct and made me want to bite through my own tongue. The floor creaked by the couch. Ken snored once, a sharp nasal rasp like a person startled in his dreams, then quiet. When I woke, I was on top of the covers with my hands folded on my chest as if someone had arranged me. My phone video was 12 hours of darkness and the faint sound of my own breathing, except there were 2 breaths. One nearer. One at the edge. At 3:19, you could hear something wet and precise, like thread pulled through damp felt. At 3:20, a whisper, right against the microphone, not words, an exhale that tasted like rust even through the screen. At 3:21, the image shook in little stutters as if the air itself had tremors. Then nothing. I went to the ophthalmologist because I needed a name more than I needed sleep. The doctor was older, with gentle hands that smelled like soap and wintergreen. He examined me in silence while a poster of the human retina watched. When he lowered his scope, he didn't look at me right away. He looked at his shoes. "This is going to sound strange," he said. "Your sclera and corneas look normal enough. The conjunctiva are irritated. But your irises," he paused. "They look like they are not the irises you had in any ID photos I just saw." He had pulled up my driver's license from the intake scan. He turned the monitor to show me. My old eyes were brown, warm and ordinary. The eyes in the mirror were darker. Not black, just deep, like a lake you can't see the bottom of. "People get tattoos," he said quickly. "Medical grade dyes exist. But the limball ring," he stopped. "Have you ever had a corneal transplant?" "No," I said. "I don't think so." The room tilted again. Voice shaking, "If I had, wouldn't I know?" He printed another referral, this time to OHSU, and suggested, in a voice made of glass, that if I felt unsafe at home, I should contact the police. I went to the police. I told them someone had been entering my locked apartment and touching my eyes while I slept. The officer tried very hard not to smile or grimace. He took notes. He said to try a camera. I said I had. He asked for the footage. I sent it. He said they'd follow up. That night, Ken insisted we sleep at his girlfriend's place in Selwood. I agreed. We triple-checked doors and windows. He teased me lightly to make it feel less like an escape, then fell asleep before midnight. I lay on the air mattress listening to water move in the pipes like a creature. Whisper, I tried to keep my eyes open. I did. I really did. It wasn't the smell that woke me. It was the sensation of a shadow bending over me until my own heat rose back from it. My lids stuck when I tried to lift them. A cool cloth wiped along my cheekbone with care I would call tenderness if it had not been so exact. Something clicked, delicate and final, like a needle snapping into place. A hand cupped my jaw. A thumb stroked the corner of my mouth as if to hush me. For a second, I felt loved. For a second, I wanted to sink into that cold. I woke with my head tilted back over the edge of the mattress, mouth open. My eyes were dry as paper. The clock said 3:03. Ken was murmuring in his sleep in the next room. My phone notification light was pulsing. There was a new message from an unknown number, a picture of my own face, taken from inches away, my lids pulled down to expose the raw red underside, the sutures shining. Beneath it, 3 words. Sleep. I'll be quick. I didn't go to OHSU. I didn't go home. We packed the car and drove east until we hit the Dalles, then kept going to a motel that smelled like old rain and carpet cleaner. By the time we checked in, my vision was ghosting again. Ken was white-lipped. "We need to call your mom," he said. "We need to call someone." I shook my head and felt the stitches tug. I called the unknown number and let it ring until the voicemail took it. The recorded greeting was a hospital switchboard tone followed by a sound like someone breathing through a surgical mask. At 3 a.m., the motel AC coughed, and the lights stuttered. I was already sitting up with my back to the headboard and a pocket knife open by my hip. The door chain hung. The chair was jammed under the knob. The bathroom fan rattled like a loose tooth. And still, the room seemed to make space, slowly, for someone else. The temperature fell. The smell arrived first, wet wool, iodine, a faint sweetness like latex powdered with sugar. My body remembered the sequence. Whisper, glove, cloth, drops, stitch. "Please," I said. I didn't mean to say it. It leaked out of me like something long rehearsed. The figure stood where the light from the highway sign painted the curtains thin. The hood lifted. The face came forward. The holes were so perfectly round I wanted to put my fingertips in them, the way your tongue finds an absent tooth. They were cloudy, a voice said at last, soft and even, like bedside talk. The words seemed to come up from the hollows rather than from a mouth. "I gave you new ones. I make things clear." "I don't want them," I said. I realized, with a horror that felt like understanding, that I could see better in the dark than I should. The room had edges no darkness should allow. I could count the tiny cracks in the motel ceiling. I could see a bug paused in the window track, its legs touching the glass. "You are sleeping wrong," the voice said. "You are keeping what doesn't help you. I take away, and I give back. I always give back." The hand in the glove lifted. In it lay a small glass vial, brown, stopped with rubber. In the vial, pale rings of something soft floated in clear fluid, 2 crescents like moons cut from old paper. "Your old ones," the voice said almost fondly. "You carried them a long time. They were tired." I gagged. I lunged. The chair skidded. The chain rattled. The knife felt like a toy in my fist. He moved without sound or hurry, as if my panic were a courtesy he would indulge before returning to the work. The gloved hand caught my wrist and squeezed until the knife fell. The other hand steadied my chin. The drops were cold lightning. The room smeared to watercolor. My body remembered how to be compliant. I sank. When I woke, the vial was on the nightstand. The rubber cap was pushed in, the ringlets inside clouding the fluid like a snow globe. My eyelids throbbed. The sutures were tighter. Ken pounded on the bathroom door because I'd locked myself in without knowing. I held the vial under the faucet and watched the old crescents swirl down motel porcelain like 2 fish released into a white river. Pause. I cried so hard my ribs ached. We didn't go back to Portland for a week. I tried to stay awake. The thing about staying awake is that it makes you see things. Not the things in your head. The real ones. The breath under doors. The slight hum of a phone charging a room away. The way a shadow grows teeth if you stare hard enough. The way your own reflection glances at you a split second after you've already looked away. On the 5th day, somewhere near Bend, we stopped at a diner with 2 bright lights and the smell of burned coffee. The waitress leaned in to ask if we were okay. When I looked up, her face flared bright in my new vision, all pores and pale peach fuzz and the wet sheen of her eyes. Behind the sheen, for a heartbeat, there was a tunnel without a bottom. I flinched. The tunnel blinked. It was gone. She set down our food and said, without meaning to say it, sleep is when the body is open. Then she caught herself, shook her head, and asked if we needed anything else. My fork scraped my plate like someone sawing through metal. At night, I started seeing the man in others the way you see a landmark behind different streets. A barista, bent and careful, placing a lid. A bus driver, staring into the tunnel of a nighttime route. An old man on a bench, hands folded like mine had been folded, waiting for permission to finish what patience already promised. And when I caught my own reflection in a gas station window, my pupils were so dark and wide they were almost the whole of me, doors ajar, the suggestion of a hallway behind them. The police called once to say the footage didn't show anything useful. The officer's voice was polite and tired. He said to try better lighting. I laughed in a way that made him say my name twice. I will not tell you how to stop him. I don't think you can. I think he is a habit the world has, like mold, like dusk, like the way our bodies loosen their guard when we drift. I don't know where he came from. A hospital, an accident, a place where people learn to touch with gloves until they forgot to use their bare hands. I know only that he is careful, and that he is generous in a way that feels like a cold hand on a fever. Here is what I can tell you. He likes windows. Locks are courtesies he acknowledges. Tape is a puzzle he enjoys slowly, like a hymn played very soft. He is patient with chains. He does not like loud voices, but he likes the moment after a loud voice, when a throat goes hoarse and a body goes still. He smells like rain trapped in fabric. He hums without humming, a vibration in the bones of a room. He never rushes. He never runs. He believes he is fixing something that would hurt more if left alone. He takes what is clouded. He gives back eyes that see too well. I know this because I am seeing too well now. I can read by the light under a door. I can tell time in the dark by the shape of the shadows moving across my wall. I can see the slow pulse in Ken's temple when he sleeps and the faint line where someone once stitched his cheek as a child. Sometimes, when I look at a stranger, I see the thread the man left in them, a whisper-thin glint at the corners of their gaze. Sometimes I see, for an instant, through rooms that are not the rooms I'm in. A kitchen with yellow tile. A narrow dorm bed. A cot in a shelter off Sandy Boulevard. A man in a hoodie bending over faces, not cruel, not kind, just steadfast. He breathes. He works. He hums. Last night, back home at last and too tired to pretend, I propped myself up in bed and started writing this. I left the window shut. I left the lights on. Around 3, the room grew very quiet. I did not look up. I did not need to. My eyes felt cool, dry, and obedient in my head. My phone, lying on the blanket, buzzed once with a single new photo. I tapped without thinking. It was a picture of my living room from above, as if taken by someone standing on the arm of the couch, Ken asleep with his mouth open, the TV casting blue on his throat. The angle was the same angle my eyes sometimes find in dreams when I float just above my own life. I stared until the screen dimmed. Then a second photo arrived, my bedroom, now, from the ceiling corner. Me on the bed, phone in hand, face lit. The caption under it was just one word. Clear. I am very tired. I am going to sleep. I am putting my phone face down. I am letting the city breathe without me for a while. Soft exhale, if I wake with new stitches I will not tell anyone. If I wake with old parts of myself bottled on the nightstand, I will flush them and I will not look back. There is a hum in the wall like a comb lightly drawn through hair. There is the smell of wool in rain. A chair slides a fraction on the floor, not because it must, but because someone is too careful to make it scrape. The air cools at my face. A thumb ghosts along the edge of my jaw to hush me, to praise me for being ready, for finally understanding that sleep is an opening. I close my eyes. I see a tunnel that has always been behind me, patient and round, waiting for me to turn around and step forward, and I do. Story 4. The toy clown that followed my son home. I'm writing this because I don't know who else to tell, and because I need to see the words in front of me to believe them. Maybe if they look ridiculous on a screen I can finally call myself crazy and go to sleep. My son came home from the park with a toy clown tucked under his arm. He said it found him. Not that he found it. Not that someone gave it to him. It followed me from the swings, Mommy, he said, lifting it so its cracked porcelain face stared over my shoulder. The clown was small, maybe a foot tall, with a faded red and white outfit and a painted grin too wide for its tiny head. One glass eye was loose. The other stared at me so hard my own eyes watered. I laughed it off. Parents laugh at the strange things children say because that's what keeps the house warm, that's what keeps the corners of rooms from growing teeth, or so I used to think. The first night, I put the clown on his dresser and tucked my son in. He was more affectionate than usual, small arms clutching my neck. He's funny, he whispered. He knows jokes. I kissed his forehead. No jokes after lights out. He giggled, but when I turned off the lamp I thought I heard a second sound, faint, a tiny breath between his laughter and the hush of the house. I told myself it was the radiator. At 2:17 a.m. I woke to the sound of giggling in the hallway. Children giggle differently in the night. It's not joy. It's the memory of joy, stretched thin. I opened my door a crack and saw the clown sitting near the baseboard. It faced my room. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I watched it as the hallway clock clicked over to 2:18. 2:19, then I stepped out, scooped the toy up, and returned it to my son's dresser. His eyes were open in the dark, reflecting the sliver of streetlight through the blinds. Did you get out of bed? I asked. No, he said. He did. His hand patted the covers beside him, which were cold to the touch. Morning made it smaller. Toys are not awful in daylight. The paint chips on its cheeks were just paint chips, the loosened eye just a cheap fitting. I even showed my son how to press the eyes so it would sit straight. When I took my hand away, the painted grin seemed wider, the little cracks along its mouth deeper, but I'm a parent, not a believer. I put it on a shelf, high up, and told him it would stay there when he wasn't playing. I work from home. The house should be alive with small noises, the keystrokes, the washing machine, the mail slot clacking at noon. That day, though, the sounds were layered with something else, a faint tapping from upstairs, tiny glass against wood, tap, tap, tap. I went up and found the clown on the window seat, looking out at the street. I hadn't put it there. I told myself I had. I told myself I was busy, distracted, forgetful. I reached for it and the porcelain was cold enough to sting my fingers. Cold like metal left outside in winter. Whisper, I put it back on the shelf. I shut the door. I went downstairs and turned the TV on too loud. The second night, I set up the hallway camera. I never used it much. It was part of a long ago, we'll feel safer, spree, and it made me feel more watched than watchful. Still, I pointed it at my son's door and went to bed. At 1:53 a.m. the monitor beside my bed lit up. There was no sound, just a blur of pixels down the hall, something darting through the frame so fast the camera struggled to keep up. It smeared. It looked like laughter looks if you could see it, stretched and split, edges flickering. I wanted to believe it was a moth. I wanted to believe anything. I went to check. The clown was sitting 3 feet from my bedroom door, facing away from me now, as if it had just finished listening through the wood and turned when it heard me breathe. I carried it back, holding it by the stiff cloth of its body so I didn't have to feel the porcelain face against my palm. Its single tight I watched my wrist the whole way. I put it on the dresser and turned to see my son awake again, eyes open. No more jokes, I said. He told me he likes you, my son whispered. Hushed, I don't remember what I said back. Something soothing. Something that made my voice sound steady when I was not. We have a cat and a good dog. They've grown up with my son and are kind to him. On the third day, they would not step over the threshold of his room. The cat flattened herself, tail a brush, spine a question mark. The dog growled at the air, then tucked himself behind my legs like a child. I picked the clown up to show them it was nothing, porcelain, cloth, a little weighty with its sand-filled belly. The room smelled like old candy. Not the sugary burst from a new bag, something older, sweetness turned to dust, a rot that pretends to be sugar. I felt my throat tighten. I set it down. My son said, "Don't be rude." I stared at him. To who? He blinked, surprised by the question, the way you would be if someone asked why you were breathing. To him, he said, as if the answer were obvious. I started to lose track of where I had left it. It kept appearing closer to my bed, then back to the shelf, then at the top of the stairs as if it had climbed and gotten tired, knees hanging over the step. I told myself I was moving it and forgetting. I told myself this because the alternative would require me to be a different person, one who believed. I am a mother. I believe in the grocery list, the pediatrician's number, the right size batteries for the smoke alarm. I do not believe in this. I did not. I tried not to. I began to notice its smile changing. The paint had been cracked from the moment I met it, but now the cracks grew like little roads snaking toward its ears. The grin stretched wider each day. The loose eye trembled in its socket sometimes, as if it were laughing behind the glass. Once, while carrying it downstairs, I felt a tremor through its body, a tiny vibration like a child's stifled giggle. Trembling, I almost dropped it. That evening I told my son he couldn't keep the toy. It isn't safe, I said. He didn't cry. He stared at me with that flat look kids have when they're listening to someone talking underwater. He doesn't like when you say that, he said. He told me you'll be lonely when I'm gone. My legs went weak. Gone where? I asked. Where he came from, my son said, casual, picking at a thread on his sleeve. It's fun there. There's a white tent and the ceiling goes up forever. The air tastes like sugar until your teeth break. He smiled with all his baby teeth. But he said you won't like it. You don't laugh enough. I put the clown in the hall closet that night. I shut the door and dragged a chair in front of it. I am not proud of this next part. I slept with my bedroom light on. Light is supposed to pin things down, but sometime after 3 a.m. the bulb popped and darkness poured in like water. In that sudden silence I heard it, the smallest sound, porcelain clicking on wood, not in the hallway, inside the closet, inside the walls, then the giggle, so close it prickled my scalp. In the morning the closet door was open. The chair was still in front of it, undisturbed, but the door stood wide and the clown sat on the top step of the stairs, facing me. I recorded myself moving it back, because that's the kind of person I have become, someone who makes evidence of her own life so she can live in it. I replayed the video. For one frame, not even a second, the clown's painted grin looked wet, the red shining as if fresh, then the picture glitched to normal again. I threw up in the sink. I tried to get rid of it. I drove it to a donation bin on the far side of town. I told my son we were taking it to be repaired. He watched through the window, silent, as I dropped it into the steel mouth and heard it thud inside like a small body. The house felt different that night. Lighter. The air moved easily. Even the dog slept with his legs in the air like he used to. I slept too, until just before dawn when I woke to my son laughing softly in his room. Not the thin laughter of the hallway, his real laughter. I went in. He was sitting cross-legged on the rug, whispering. The toy clown sat in front of him. I don't remember screaming, but my throat hurt for hours. I grabbed it. I checked the car for signs that it had ridden back with us, my trunk latch, the back seat, anywhere a small thing could hide. Nothing. I drove to the old quarry outside town where people dump broken things and think the ground will forget for them. I climbed the fence. I threw it as far as I could and listened for the porcelain to shatter. It broke. I heard it break. I drove home shaking, knuckles blister white. That night my son stood at the foot of my bed. I woke to his whisper. He liked that. He was smiling, but his eyes were wet. He said, "That's the first funny thing you've done." I went to a priest. I went to a therapist. I went to the pediatrician, who gave me a pamphlet about transitional objects and developmental stages. I went home with the papers folded so sharply their edges cut my thumb. The house smelled like that old candy again, stronger, syrup gone sour. I set up every camera we owned, nursery, hall, living room, my bedroom. I told myself I would watch the feeds and find the thread in reality where my sanity had snagged. At 2:12 a.m. the living room camera caught movement. A small figure stood in the doorway. Not my son. Not exactly the clown either, something between, height of a child, head tilted, face a smear of white and red that the lens could not resolve. It stepped into the room, but it didn't walk. Its feet barely lifted, as if strings held its wrists and knees. It approached the camera until all I could see was a field of cracked white, then the feed cut to static. I ran. I didn't think. I threw open my son's door and found him sitting upright, eyes fixed on the corner of the room where the moonlight gathered like smoke. I reached for him. His skin was shaking cold. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." He did not move. "He says you can go," my son whispered. "But I can't." He followed me home. He belongs here. His teeth clicked together, chattering, though the house was warm. He says he likes to live where the laughter used to be. I screamed his name. I grabbed him and carried him to the car. We drove to my sister's, an hour away, where the world is louder and normal life presses from every direction. My sister made us eggs at 4 a.m. because there was nothing else to do. My son didn't eat. He stared at the blank TV screen. If I had looked more closely, maybe I would have seen the reflection of something sitting beside him, something small, the suggestion of a white cheek and a red grin in the dark glass. We tried to stay there. We really did. But I kept getting messages from my security app that motion was detected at home. First in the hall. Then the kitchen. Then my bedroom. Motion, then laughter on the audio channel, a high, broken sound like wind chimes too close to the ear. Finally, a photo captured from the front camera, my door slightly open, a smear of red and white at the edge of the frame, the timestamp 2:17 a.m., like the very first night. My sister said this was grief. She used the word as if something had already died. Maybe something has. I went back today while my sister took my son to the park. I told myself I would cleanse the place of its tricks. I would smash every camera, every battery, everything that turned the house into a mirror of my fear. I would pack what mattered and leave the rest behind. I walked room to room with a trash bag, my footsteps louder than they have ever been in that house. My bedroom door was open. The bed was neatly made. On the pillow lay a single glass eye. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The eye was perfectly round, with a tiny fleck painted inside to imitate the light of real eye catches. It looked wet. I backed away. The door to my son's room creaked open. The room was empty except for the smell, sweet, ruined candy, and something else, fainter, the dry rasp of fabric being pulled, like a puppet string slipping through a hand. I turned to leave. I got as far as the hall when the lights went out. Not all at once, first the overhead, then the little nightlight, then the last shy glow from the camera before it died. In the dark, a small hand slipped into mine. Warm. Familiar. My son's height. I almost cried with relief. Baby. I said. We're going. The hand squeezed. Too tight. Porcelain cold under the warmth. Shaky laugh, and then the giggle, right by my ear, the kind of giggle you do after a good secret, the kind that becomes laughter if you let it. I ran. The hand slid from mine like a glove falling off. I stumbled into the living room, slammed the door behind me, and leaned on it, shaking. On the other side, tiny fingers tapped the wood, polite, patient, tap, 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 until the taps moved away and up, one stair at a time, toward the room where my child sleeps when the world is kind. I don't know how to end this, because it hasn't ended. I'm at my sister's desk, watching the nursery monitor from a place that should be safe. My son is asleep, mouth open, a little line of drool at the corner, the way he slept when he was a baby. There's nothing in the frame except the soft rise and fall of his chest. I can hear the quiet night sounds of this house, the fridge hum, the faraway rush of a car passing. Whisper, and just now, on the audio, a second breath beside his, then a faint rustle, like cloth against cloth, then the soft wheeze of something that learned to laugh before it learned to breathe. The camera brightens to adjust for the dark, and for a second I see it, the shape of my son, and a smaller shadow leaning close, face to face, and I tell myself it's the curtain, or a trick of light, or a bad connection. I tell myself anything I can so I can stay here, frozen, listening, but the laughter is not a trick, it's small and patient and it knows my name now. I can hear my name in it, like a promise, like a punchline. If anyone reads this and thinks I'm making it up, please, believe whatever helps you sleep. I used to sleep too. But if your child comes home with something that followed them, if your house begins to smell like sweetness gone wrong, if the laughter lives where the light won't, don't wait, don't bargain, don't be polite. He likes polite. He likes pretending he's a toy. And he always finds his way back. Story 5. The show that wasn't on any channel. I didn't remember the name until last fall, when a seagull dropped a clamshell onto my windshield and it cracked like a thin scream. The sound jolted something loose in my head. Not a title. More like a time. For 17, I saw it as clearly as the digital clock on our VCR used to glow in the dim living room. 4. 1. 7, and then the rest came like tides rolling in under the door. We rushed home from school to catch it. We never called it anything. We just said, "Is it on?" and if it was, we'd sit very still. It wasn't in the TV guide. Channel 98 didn't exist according to the booklet tucked inside the Sunday paper, the one our parents circled for sitcom reruns and sports. But if you turned the dial just right, a click past the last channel, the picture would sway into focus at 4:17 p.m. It always smelled like warm dust when it started. There was a hum you felt in your skull before you heard it with your ears, and we watched. I went back to my hometown because my mother had slipped on the back steps and broken her hip. The air tasted like salt and rust. Sea fog beaded up on the porch railings. Inside, the old RCA sat where it had always been, a square stomach waiting to be fed. Mom dozed under an Afghan that had lost its bright colors to the years. The house made those sounds that houses make, the breathing of old wood, the small sighs of settling, and the TV was an eye that wanted opening. "Do you remember a show?" I asked her when she woke. "When I was a kid. After school. A weird one." She frowned the way people do when they think it's their mind failing them. "Honey, you watched a lot of shows." "This one wasn't on any channel," I said, and I hated how fast the words came out. I slowed my voice. "It wasn't listed. It came on between 4:17 and 4:46. I know that sounds static," she said, relieved that she'd found a memory. She patted my hand. "You used to sit there and watch static. I'd say, 'Sweetheart, you'll fry your eyes with that,' and you'd say, 'Shoo, it's starting.'" She laughed, then stopped when my expression didn't change. "You're scaring me." "Sorry," I said. I wasn't sorry. Something inside me uncurled like a mouth. I called everyone I could remember. Ben answered from a kitchen that echoed like he hadn't unpacked much. As soon as I said the time, he whispered, "You remember that too? Do you remember the playground by the ocean?" I asked. "The swings made of rope. They moved even when there was no wind." "The carousel," Ben said. "But it was all horses with no eyes." "Do you remember the man whose lips didn't move when he talked? His breath hitched. Was that a man? Was there a title card? Anything?" I asked. "Only the clock," he said. "Only 4:17. We talked the way divers talk after they surface too fast." His voice fizzed and popped, and I told myself it was a bad connection. We said we'd meet at the old waterfront diner. He didn't show. I called and it rang into a dense, busy nothing, like the line was full of bees. Instead, I found Marley in the grocery store, staring at a display of canned chowder as if the labels were hypnotic. She recognized me and hugged too tightly. Her hair smelled like the ocean when it's pulling itself away. When I said, 4:17, she put the chowder back carefully and pushed her cart aside. "My brother," she said, just like that, and it wedged in my ribs. He used to watch with me. When it would cut to those other parts, the ones that shouldn't be in a kid's show, he'd breathe funny. Like the TV was breathing for him. "What do you mean other parts?" I asked, though I knew. I felt it at the back of my teeth. The playground would go away and there'd be the hallway, she said, eyes unfocused. That long hallway made of gray, something. Not stone. Not metal. The lights were too far apart, and the dark between them was thick. I think the camera was the child. The way it wobbled, like someone small was holding it, and it would turn and there was nothing behind and nothing ahead, and the hum got louder. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. And then the whisper would say our names. We stood with our carts in the middle of an aisle of food that couldn't help us. The overhead speaker played a cheerful song about summer sales. The hum behind it was a memory, but it felt like sound now, rising under the floor tiles. Do you ever dream the clock? I asked. I dreamed the teeth, she said, and turned away so quickly the wheels squealed. That night, the fog thickened like wool. My mother slept and I sat on the carpet we'd kept too long, with the TV vacant and dark. The old VCR beeped 12 o'clock because no one had set the time since the last power outage. My phone said 4:12. I wasn't going to do it. I was an adult. The TV belonged to a world where things could be fixed by jiggling the antenna, where a shape on the screen was only a shape. I told myself these things like prayers. At 4:17, I turned the dial one click past the last channel. The black on the screen brightened to a color that wasn't a color. The hum moved from my ears to the tender spots behind my knees. Static. Dense as wool, yes, but shifting. It was almost a snowfield, and then it wasn't. It was a beach made of sugar. It was a sky full of flies. It cleared for a breath and I saw them, rope swings in an empty lot by the sea, the horizon a flat blade. The picture hiccuped and slid. I leaned forward without meaning to. I felt small. I felt watched. The carousel appeared in a slow pan. The animals had polished, bone-like surfaces that caught the light in a way that made my stomach pass through several shapes before deciding on sick. No eyes. No bridles. Their mouths were open too wide, like mirrors were installed where tongues should be. The music it played wasn't music, a nursery rhyme arranged by someone who didn't know what joy was, Ring Around the Rosie, but each note had dust in it. Turn it off, I said aloud, to prove I could, and my hand didn't move. The screen darkened as if to gather breath, and when it brightened again the scene had changed. The hallway. Gray not stone. Lights too far apart. The camera bobbing as it moved. As it moved towards something that didn't change when you got closer to it. I understood that as a child and didn't have a word for it. Now I have many words and none of them help. The hum deepened into a tone you feel in your teeth fillings. And then it said my name. The sound didn't come from the speaker. It came from behind me. From inside the TV. From the carpet. From the small space between eyelid and eye. My mother coughed in her sleep and the sound made a shape of safety that lasted exactly one breath. Hello, I said. My voice was wrong in the room. What do you want? The hallway paused. The frame juddered, a stuttering strobe of the same image, and then a superimposed clock slid into the top left corner like a coin falling into water. 4:31, the numbers trembled. I thought of Marley's brother and Ben not answering and felt how thin the floor was. I pulled the plug from the wall. The hum didn't stop. When I turned, the glass of the dark screen showed the room, my shape hunched like a question mark, the doorway behind me, and in the doorway a narrowing darkness, like fog made into a person, like the negative space where a person could be. The hum concentrated there the way a smell concentrates in a small space. I spoke my mother's name the way people speak the names of saints. "Go to the lighthouse," the TV said, and the TV wasn't on. The voice was the voice the ocean uses when it wants something. I didn't sleep. I watched my mother breathe. At dawn the fog thinned until it was a memory pretending to be weather. The lighthouse was a white bone at the edge of the world. The stairs up to its door had been replaced after a storm the year I left town, but the handrail still wobbled. A rusted chain circled the knob with a polite sign, "No admittance." The door was unlocked. Inside, the air had that warm metal smell of machines that never truly rest. The light above me rotated like a slow, thoughtful eye. I descended instead of ascending. The floor under the lighthouse had a hatch that had been painted shut and then forced open, leaving ragged edges like teeth. The hum was louder down there. It was louder in me. The basement wasn't a basement. It was a room full of dead technology, and all of it was listening. Old radios with their fabric grills stained dark in the shape of what they'd been hearing. A reel-to-reel player with no tape, turning anyway. A television older than the one at home, all wood and glass, unplugged but warm. At the center, a rack of equipment that didn't match any decade, metal boxes with unlabeled dials and a muted red light that pulsed like a small animal's heartbeat. The wall opposite was concrete, but at a certain angle it stopped being itself. It shimmered the way heat shimmers over asphalt. It was both there and not, and behind not wall lay the hallway I knew. Not a picture. A continuation. The same gray. The same wrong. "Hello," I said again, and my voice was steadier than it should have been. A speaker crackled without a cord and a child laughed. It was the kind of laugh that makes you feel like you are sitting in the wrong seat. The carousel music wound itself backward and then forward until it found the key of now. The clock appeared in the corner of everything. 4:17, and then it fluttered to 4:18, like a bird twisting in a net. "What are you?" I asked. It hummed an answer, which is to say it did not answer. The radios breathed in. The knot wall's depth pulsed, closer and further, like waves. I took a step. I have never done a braver thing or a stupider one. The air grew hard. My teeth felt too long in my mouth, and suddenly I remembered something I had forgotten to remember, that we kids had played on the rocks below the lighthouse after watching, making up our own versions of the show, repeating lines as if they were spells, and that once I had bled from both nostrils and not known until someone screamed, and that Ben had been dared to look through the narrow vent in the lighthouse foundation, and that when he did he had said, "They see me." I took another step. The hum was pleased. The surface of the knot wall swelled like the skin of water when a fish comes close to look at your reflection. The light overhead swung a slow white blade across my shoulders. I heard a rustle and a footstep that had the weight of a child and turned very carefully. There was no one. There was a narrowing darkness exactly my height and shape. It leaned. So did I. "I won't go with you," I said, and my voice failed only once. "You can't have me." The radio's fabric sighed as if something behind them had exhaled. The clock slid to 4:29. My phone buzzed in my pocket, although there was no service down there. It was a voicemail from an unknown number. I didn't answer. The red light pulsed faster. The knot wall shivered and a long, low sound came through the room like a ship making a turn at sea. I ran. Running in a lighthouse is a choice you make with your ankle's future. The stairs tilted, the handrail lurched. I banged my shoulder against the doorframe and the daylight hit me so hard my eyes watered. Outside, the ocean behaved as if everything was normal, which is one of the crueler things nature does. Gulls barked. The fog considered returning. I put my hands on my knees and counted until the numbers meant something again. On the walk back I listened to the voicemail because of course I did. Ben's breathing filled the first 3 seconds, that childhood wheeze he'd had when he laughed too hard. "It's on," he said. "It's starting." He sounded happy and 5 years old. Then his voice moved far away while staying where it was. "Look," he whispered. "They see me." The message ended with the soft knock of a phone falling on a hard floor. I didn't go to the police. What would I say? I didn't tell my mother anything beyond, "I have an errand." I sat in the living room and pretended to read a magazine that had recipes for summer salads and felt the TV watching me though it wasn't on. At 4:17, I stood and left the room. I made tea slowly in the kitchen and stirred it until it went cold. The hum pressed at the walls like weather wanting in. That night, I took my mother's old VHS camcorder from the hall closet. It weighed more than memory. I aimed it at the TV at 4:10 and pressed record. I didn't look at the screen. I stood with my back to it and filmed the space for 40 minutes and my hands shook and my mouth dried, and when the tape clicked I felt something in the room relax, like a host disappointed by a polite guest. I rewound the tape with my heart doing a drumline against my ribs. The tiny screen hissed to life. It showed the living room in low-resolution patience. Carpet. Coffee table. The blank TV. At 4:17 the picture rippled minutely, a heat haze in a digital winter, and then the hall. The gray. The light. The camera I was holding trembled though I remembered standing perfectly still. A whisper said my name from inside the machine I was holding. The clock slid into place like a lid shutting on a jar. My face, reflected in the dark TV, smiled at a time when I was not smiling. I snapped the tape out. I put it in the microwave and watched the machine shrug and flicker and finally die in a smell of hot, bitter plastic. I took the ruined reel to the lighthouse and left it on the steps like an offering. The fog swallowed it the way fog swallows anything that thinks it can be left behind. The next morning I drove to Marley's duplex and knocked until my knuckles were sore. She opened with a look that said she hadn't slept. She let me in without speaking. The living room had that not lived in look you get when you move your furniture around because of a feeling. The TV faced the wall. The clock on the microwave was unplugged. Her eyes were too bright. "He called me last night," she said. "My brother." From a number that said it was my house. "Do you know how he sounded?" "Yes," I said. She nodded. "I put my phone in the freezer," she said. "Do you think that's anything?" "We should leave town," I said, and the words came with a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "We left before," she said. "You did." "I did." "Did it help?" We looked at the TV facing the wall like a child in timeout. It wants us to remember. Or it needs us to. Maybe that's how it keeps broadcasting. We went to the lighthouse together because people make bad decisions in pairs. The chain was back across the door. The polite sign had been replaced by a politer one. When we tried the knob it locked the way a throat locks around a pill. "Listen," Marley said. At first all I heard was ocean. Then the turn of the light above. Then, weaving under and through it, children's voices counting. Not English. Not numbers. Something you count with when you don't want anyone to notice you're counting. I held my phone out and it recorded nothing but wind. When I played it back later that night, I heard only the clink of the chain against the door and my own breathing. When I listened at 4:17, I heard the counting and then my name and then Marley's, threaded into the sound like a needle into a vein. I would like to tell you that I did something brave that ended it. I would like to say I found a switch and turned it off. What I did was buy my mother a new clock radio that only plays from my phone. I set her TV on a streaming stick that has menus and passwords and gates I could lock like doors. I taped over the old antenna port with painter's tape. I told myself stories about signals and infrastructure, as if logic were a leash. The truth is simpler and worse. The show was never on any channel. It never needed one. It waited for us to be alone, for a room to be a room and a screen to be a mirror, for a child to sit very still. It used what was already there, the hum of the house, the space inside a voice, the longing to be called by name. It used our remembering like an antenna we raised for it with our hands. Sometimes, at 4:17, the room tilts just slightly. Pictures on the wall correct themselves afterward, embarrassed to have moved. The air feels damp as if the fog has sent its small scouts ahead. The microwave clock blinks although it isn't blinking. From the kitchen doorway, a narrowing darkness leans as if to listen. If I leave the TV unplugged, it whispers through the glass of its own reflection. If I turn a radio to between stations, the static doesn't sit still, it turns toward me like a field of grass when something large moves under it. I won't watch, I tell it. I won't. It is patient. It knows I already am. At night I dream the playground by the ocean. The swings move in wind that never touches the skin. The carousel turns though no mechanism turns it. In the polished mouths of the horses, where tongues should be, I see only the room I am sleeping in, and behind me, reflected in the reflection, the hall of gray knot stone lit by distant lights. Footsteps come from both directions. They never arrive. The clock says 4:17 and then 4:18 and then 4:19 and I wake with the taste of salt like I've been breathing through the sea. Sometimes I answer unknown numbers and there is only my own voice, delayed, saying, hello, from a place I haven't reached yet. Sometimes I hold the phone away from my ear and a child laughs, and it's not cruel, not mocking, it's excited, like I have finally come back to sit still and listen. One day, last week, I stood on the porch with my coffee and heard the faint rattle of a shopping cart over uneven pavement. Marley pushed it around the corner, hair lifting in a wind I couldn't feel. There was a TV in the cart, an old wood frame set like the one in the lighthouse, its screen veiled with a gray that wasn't dust. She stopped at the foot of my steps and looked up at me like someone arriving with a gift and a threat wrapped together. I found it, she said. At the thrift store. It was humming. It was for me. We can put it back, I said. My voice shook on the last word, as if the word back were a dark step into a shallow pool. She smiled, and the smile was a wound and a forgiveness. Or we can finally see, she said. What it wants us to see. She touched the set with a kind of tenderness I remember from childhood, the way we touched the screen to feel the static kiss our fingertips. Her palm recoiled a fraction and then settled, as if something inside had pressed back. My phone buzzed with a new voicemail from an unknown number. I didn't need to listen to know what it said. The clock on the microwave said 4:16 though it was morning. The kitchen was suddenly the hallway again, and the hallway was the kitchen, and the lights were too far apart. I carried the TV inside. It was heavier than it looked. We set it where the old one had sat, facing the room that had watched us grow. My mother slept in her chair, her breathing the kind of breathing that counts without numbers. The cord lay on the carpet like a patient snake. Are you sure? I asked, and the question did not specify who I meant. We did not plug it in. The screen brightened anyway. The hum stood up in the room and shook its wet fur and the drops went into my mouth and ears and eyes. The clock slid into the top left corner like it had always belonged there. 4:17, and then the playground, and then the carousel, and then the hallway, and then a mirror inside a mirror, and then my name spoken from both sides of the glass at once, the voice of the ocean when it wants something, the voice of a child when it's calling you back inside because your show is on. I am writing this quickly, between breaths. I know I will delete it and write it again and convince myself I dreamed the first version. You'll ask where it comes from and I will say the lighthouse, and that will be true and not true the way all good answers are. It comes from the space between channels. From the fog that remembers. From us. It comes whenever you sit very still and a room is small enough to hold you in something else. If you hear it call you at 4:17, if your screen brightens though you know it cannot, if you taste salt and feel the carpet lean toward the television with you, do not answer. Do not speak your own name aloud. Do not count with the counting. Do not say, hello, into the dark. If you do, it will be so happy to see you again, and it will not let you leave before 4:46, and when you do, you will be carrying a little of its signal inside you, humming, waiting, remembering. Story 6. The Flesh Gate Beneath the City. The first time I heard the breathing under Chicago, I thought it was a train I'd forgotten the schedule for. The platform at Jackson was almost empty, just a few commuters and a busker packing his guitar. The air moved in a slow swell that didn't match the stale corridor drafts. It lifted the hairs on my arms and pressed the smell of iron against the back of my tongue. I stood there, listening. In, and out, a massive lung that had never learned to be discreet. Breath, I told myself it was just the tunnel system flexing as another line passed somewhere else. Concrete remembers vibrations. Steel amplifies them. Human imagination fills in the gaps. Still. I waited long after the busker left, until the janitor gave me a look that said, go home. When I finally rode up the escalator, the sound followed me like a thought I couldn't swallow. I'm a freelancer, odd jobs for local outlets, public records, sometimes a feature if my editor trusts me to spell names right. 2 days later, researching a piece about abandoned infrastructure, I pulled up the 1992 flood reports, the old freight tunnels, the maintenance maps. A clerk from the city's records department, an older guy with knotted hands, slipped me a manila folder he shouldn't have had. Don't sign for this, he whispered. Bring it back by Friday. Inside were photocopies of photocopies, grainy pages where the gray had eaten the letters. A memo from 1943 about biologic displacement below State Street. A 1968 complaint from an engineer describing elastic masonry. An undated page with a hand-drawn shape like a mouth, annotated, warm to touch, rhythmic. The folder smelled faintly of mildew, and something else, sweet in a hospital way. I called my friend Nate, who liked city spelunking more than staying married. He said yes before I finished asking. If we find anything, you write it up. I just want to see it, he said. His laugh came out too fast, like he was swallowing the end of a dare. We went down after midnight, when downtown thinned and the sirens were farther apart. We picked a utility door near an alley, a place where bricks looked newer than the wall around them. The padlock wasn't new. The bolt cutters protested, then gave up with a sound like a cough. Inside, a short stare, a stink of damp paper, then a corridor the city forgot to erase from its own memory. Our headlamps drew cones that made the dark look organized. The tunnel ran north-south, the walls patched with concrete from 3 different decades. Old cables sagged like dead vines. Water spoke in small voices from somewhere ahead. After 20 minutes, the breathing began again, faint, not wind, not trains. In, and out, so patient it felt cruel. Feel that? Nate whispered. Yeah, I said, and swallowed. The air tasted like a penny pressed to the tongue. Whisper, where is that coming from? We turned a bend and the tunnel widened. The walls had been broken and reskinned with something not concrete, not stone. It reflected our light in a way that made me think of a tongue under a doctor's lamp. The surface wasn't exactly wet. It was dewy. It shivered when our footsteps stopped. Nate reached out. "Don't," I started, but his glove brushed it. He jerked back. "Warm," he said. Like a dog's belly." I aimed my light higher. The seam where brick met this other stuff wasn't a seam. It was a gradual blending, as if masonry had learned a new trick, like mortar discovering it could bead and pulse. There was a sound beneath the breathing now, a deep wet sound, like something turning over in sleep. We found the gate by accident. One moment, a wall. The next, an oval the size of a city bus, its border ruffled and raw like it kept trying to close and couldn't. Inside, there was no inside, only a darkness that absorbed the halo of our lamps and gave back the suggestion of depth, of downward, of waiting. The gate exhaled. Our coats fluttered. We stood there, both pretending we were scientists cataloging a specimen and not two people who had never learned the right prayers. Nate said, too loudly, "This is incredible," which is the kind of sentence you say when you're about to lie to yourself for months. We took pictures. The photos were wrong. The image on my phone looked like a wall of wet clay. On Nate's, like bad insulation. In person, it was unmistakably alive. We circled the chamber. The floor was not flat but had a subtle rise, as if we were walking on a chest. Every 20 feet, a puckered opening no bigger than my palm flexed, inhaled, tasted the air. Behind the gate, beyond the oval, I caught motion, no shape, just a ripple of possibility, like heat above asphalt. The first voice came as we were leaving. Not human words, not sound shaped by throat and mouth, but a pressure that blossomed in the cavities behind my eyes. It was not language. It was a suggestion of equivalence. It made me think of a paragraph I hadn't read yet telling me I had already agreed with it. I didn't tell Nate. Nate didn't tell me his hands were shaking. We made it to the surface with our mouths closed and our hearts choking on the same thought. We had seen something that didn't want to be seen, or wanted to be seen only by the parts of us that weren't going to survive. I didn't sleep. When I did, I woke up with my tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth and the sensation of a draft moving through the walls of my apartment. The radiator hissed in a rhythm that matched the gate. The neighbors upstairs walked in loops that made no sense. The city's noises had merged into a single organism trying on the shape of morning. The records folder waited on my table. I opened it again. A page I hadn't noticed before slid loose, a typed list of addresses with dates. 2 were near the loop, 1 in Bronzeville, 1 where the river turns its back on itself. Next to each address, clearance due to subsidence. But the language bent. Someone had added, in pencil, hunger, then crossed it out. Then, pressure. Then, messily, breath. I picked one address and went. At street level, there was a vacant lot, a rectangle of winter-dead grass and a chain-link fence. The snow had melted there in a shape like an ear. A woman in a red coat stood on the corner with a dog that didn't seem interested in being alive. "They've been digging off and on for years," she said when I asked. "Sometimes trucks at night. Once the whole block smelled like sick meat." Breath. That night, I dreamed I was under the city again. The gate was closer, or I was. The border of it held a pattern, faint concentric ridges, like fingerprints on a gigantic thumb. I pressed my palm to it and felt my hand become a series of answers. Something pressed back, gentle, curious, hungry. I woke up with my hand against my chest like I was keeping something in. Nate texted me a video. It was 5 seconds long, shot at the gate. The image pulsed, then stuttered. On the third pulse, there was a suggestion of a face in the darkness, too many eyes or not enough, a mouth opening like a coin slot. The video glitched. On the last frame, there was a pattern in the border. The ridges again. Fingerprints. Going back tonight, he wrote. You coming? I typed, deleted, typed again. I'll meet you there, I sent, and then stared at those words like they belonged to someone else. The second time, we brought rope, chalk, a gas meter. The meter complained for a while, then calmed, as if deciding nothing here was officially poisonous. The breathing rolled over us. The floor's subtle rise felt steeper. The chamber had grown. Or our courage had shrunk. We stood at the rim of the oval. The darkness within had texture now, waves migrating across a surface we couldn't see, like the ocean at night under wind. Nate leaned in. Hear that? He whispered. I didn't, but I did, or rather, I felt the idea of a whisper moving through me, a reminder of a voice that wasn't there yet. The gate inhaled. My head filled with a cold that wasn't temperature. A shape suggested itself, no, an arrangement, a logic. I saw streets rewired as veins. The river kinked into an artery. High-rises stacked like vertebrae. The city reimagined as a creature that had always been asleep and now, was considering the value of waking. Nate took a step forward. A flap near the rim, a petal of the border, unfurled as if in greeting. Beneath it, a membrane thin to translucence. Something enormous slid by behind it, too close to focus on. My mouth tasted of salt and hospitals. Whisper, don't move, I said. He moved. He reached his gloved hand into the shadow beyond the border, not into the darkness itself but to touch the thin film that formed as the petal lifted. His fingertips dented it. The membrane dimpled, then accepted the shape of him, then matched it from the other side. The dimple deepened like a kiss. Nate made a sound I had never heard him make, small, tender, surprised. The flap closed. Nate pulled back, stumbling. His glove shone, slick. He peeled it off with a grimace. His skin was unbroken, but the lines of his knuckles were wrong, softened, as if his hand had been taught a new anatomy. He flexed again. It's fine, he said, which is another sentence you say when your life has just become something else. We left faster than we came. On the way out, the tunnel walls carried a new resonance, like the gate had hummed and everything around it had learned the refrain. The city above was too bright. Streetlights looked like lidless eyes. Cars swam through lanes as if guided by currents I couldn't name. The cold air tasted of pennies and promises. Over the next week, Nate sent messages at odd hours. Do you feel it when you stand near a manhole? I think the L schedule changed, but only when I'm on the platform. I dreamed I was inside something and it was practicing breathing with me. His handwriting on a paper scrap he left at my door was barely his, letters rounded, the stems of his T's overly long. On the back of the scrap, a pattern of ridges, traced like a fingerprint. Larger than any human hand. I tried to write. The words buckled. My editor called twice. I let it go to voicemail. At night, the radiator kept time with a pulse that wasn't mine. In the hallway, the plaster bulged around a pipe and looked, in certain light, like a rib. I started avoiding mirrors. If I caught my reflection too quickly, my mouth seemed to move a beat late. It felt like the city had found a frequency we didn't know we were tuned to, and now it was tuning us back. The clerk at records didn't come to work for 2 days. When he returned, there were new pages in the folder, slicker paper, cleaner font. The dates were updated to last month. The addresses were everywhere, not just downtown. There was a new term in the margins, integration events. The pencil note next to it said, breath increasing. Where did these come from? I asked. He watched me like a doctor deciding whether to lie. People bring things, he said. Sometimes they need to be in the record. That night, the voice returned. Not words, invitations. Not meaning, alignment. It pressed itself into the shape of my memories, tried them on like clothes, settled on the ones in which I stood under bridges or waited in stairwells or listened to pipes. Breath, I understood then, not with facts, but with the flattening certainty that arrives when your body is already convinced that the gate had not been placed there. The city had been laid around it. Nate called me from the tunnel entrance. The call dropped 3 times. On the 4th, his voice came through thin, stretched. It's so much bigger, he said. I think it's ready. It wants, the phone coughed static. In the brief quiet, I heard it, the exhale, through a device that shouldn't have known how to carry it. I didn't remember deciding to go. I was just there, bolt cutters useless now because the door stood open, the padlock hanging like an ornament. The stairs were different. They seemed to lengthen as I descended. The tunnel smelled like a butcher shop after a flood. The hum made my teeth feel crowded. The chamber had doubled. Tripled. The floor wasn't a floor anymore but a diaphragm easing up and down. The oval towered, its border rippling with tiny muscular contractions that, God help me, I recognized as anticipation. The darkness inside moved with purpose, geometry glimpsed in the way a school of fish makes math out of hunger. Nate stood at the rim. His right hand, bare, looked wrong from here, the fingers too smooth, the knuckles failing to interrupt the skin. He turned, and the look on his face was not terror. It was awe so pure it looked like grief. It knows us, he said. It learned our names. I took a step forward, then another. The gate inhaled. The air left me. For a moment, I was weightless on the threshold of a choice that had already made itself without me. The voice, the pressure, the suggestion, it unfolded like a city map and, in every neighborhood, a single instruction, open. The border lifted a petal, then another, like eyelids rising on a morning that would never be called day. Beneath each flap, membranes thinned, and behind them, impressions formed, hands seeking hands. My eyes watered. My throat clenched and unclenched at some forgotten rhythm. The fingerprints in the border shone, wet and unmistakable, and I understood that fingerprints were never identifiers, they were keys. Nate reached for me with his wrong hand. It was warm. It was soft in a new way. It doesn't hurt, he said, and there was wonder in his voice and something like apology. It's only what, I don't know. The floor rose. The chamber breathed us forward. I found my own hand lifting, fingers opening without instruction. My skin thrummed as if it were remembering an older pattern. The membrane met my palm and, in the instant before contact, I heard Chicago above us exhale, bridges flexing, trains slowing, the river pausing in its odd reverse, like a body testing how awake it was willing to be. The touch was not cold. It was recognition. It was a page in a file drawer sliding home. It was the first time you learn the word for your own fear and understand it is not the enemy, it is the doorframe. Breath, I felt my palm soften. The lines in it unspooled and rewrote. The membrane learned me. I learned it back. Behind the membrane, something enormous shifted closer, like a pupil widening. The voice rose, not loud, just, total. It pushed through my teeth and made the bones of my ear hum. The instruction that was not instruction arranged itself inside me like a landmark. Open. 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 On the street above, a siren bent down into a pitch I'd never heard before. Far away, 100 old pipes sighed. The city curled, gentle as a cat, and pressed its weight against our little chamber in the dark. The gate took a breath that felt like 5 million, and then another. I think of the clerk's folder and its updated dates. I think of vacant lots shaped like ears. I think of 2 billion fingertips pressed to glass all day, learning openings. I think of the old memo that called it displacement, as if it were moving us when all it had ever wanted was for us to remember we were already part of it. If someone finds this, if this is story or report or residue, tell yourself what you need to tell yourself. Develop the negatives. Call it an allegory. Blame the gas lines. Say, it's incredible, like you're still in charge of your own mouth. You'll be right, in the way a whisper is right even when it isn't heard. Because even if you ignore the breath, your building will feel it. Even if you leave town, your sleep will find the rhythm again. Even if you tear up every map, the fingerprints on the borders will still fit something you carry with you. You will stand on a quiet corner at 3 in the morning and realize the stoplight doesn't change for you, it changes for the pulse you are standing inside. The membrane presses against my palm and waits. Nate's hand, soft, altered, finds my shoulder with a tenderness I had not expected to survive the dark. The city above gathers itself. Whisper, it's ready. The gate exhales, and I exhale with it, and the streetlights blink, once, twice, like eyes learning a new way to stay open. Story 7. The yellow halls behind my apartment. I heard the humming before I found the door. It wasn't the kind of hum you get from a refrigerator or a streetlight. It was the sound of a headache that had learned to speak, low, steady, patient. I followed it down the back stairs of my building with a trash bag in one hand and my phone's flashlight in the other. The alley smelled like old rain and hot metal. Something wet dripped behind the dumpsters. There was a narrow slit between 2 brick walls I had never noticed before. It was like the building had exhaled and left a seam. I angled my shoulders and slid in, scraping my jacket. The hum grew louder. My phone camera struggled to focus, painting the bricks with cold light. And then I saw it, a door I swear had not been there yesterday. Beige. Featureless. The kind of door that belongs in an office renovation that never got finished. I should have gone back upstairs. I should have pretended I didn't hear it. But the hum pressed on my ribs from the inside. I pulled the handle. The door opened onto a corridor the color of weak tea and nicotine. Yellow walls, a mottled pattern of faded squares, a carpet darkened in patches as if the floor had been sweating. The air was heavier than any room I've ever been in, as if every breath had been used once already. Fluorescent lights rattled in a nervous harmony. My phone display stuttered, brightness fluctuating like it couldn't commit. I took 1 step in. Then 2. The door swung shut behind me with a slow, padded sigh. I turned, but there was no door. Only more of the yellow. Breathes in. I told myself I wasn't far. 10 steps in, maybe 20. The building would be just behind me, just on the other side of paint and drywall. I reached out and touched the wall. It was warmer than my hand. The wallpaper had a faint give to it, like something moist lived beneath it, like skin. I started marking my path with keys, dragging the jagged tooth along the wall. The sound was swallowed immediately. No echo. Just the hum. I left a bright gray scrape and felt better for exactly 2 seconds, until I turned a corner and saw 3 identical halls leading away like a dealer laying down cards. Left. Right. Straight. I chose straight. My shoes made damp whispering sounds on the carpet. The hum crawled through my ears and nested in the back of my throat. The smell changed as I walked, lemon cleaner, then old diapers, then the plastic scent of a new shower curtain. I passed a red exit sign mounted above a blank section of wall. No door beneath it. No way through. Just the sign buzzing, buzzing. I checked my phone. No signal. The time said 12:04 a.m. I had taken the trash out at 11:16 p.m. That didn't feel right. My heart thumped faster, not in panic, but in that careful way you get when you realize you're on ice that might not hold. Pause. I told myself to go back. Turn around, follow the scrape. I turned, and the scrape continued. My gray scar ran both directions, vanishing into corners I hadn't walked yet. I pressed my thumb into the wall hard enough to lift a bubble under the paper. It made a soft, popping sound and released a puff of air that smelled like old mustard. I kept moving. The hum had a pulse to it now, like slow breathing. I passed an office chair with no wheels, a foam cushion torn open and stiff with age. I passed a water fountain set into a wall with no plumbing chasing away beneath it. I pressed the button and heard water traveling somewhere far away. Nothing came out. The button stuck to my finger and left a tacky residue. I tried to be methodical. Left turns only. Then right turns only. Count steps. 100 paces, then mark the wall again. The numbers folded on themselves. I lost track at 73, started again, lost track at 9, tried again, began to suspect the carpet was stealing numbers the way the walls stole sound. I wasn't alone. That was the thought I kept pushing away, like a fly you don't swat because swatting would mean you admit it's there. Every so often I heard footsteps that were not mine. Not close, not far, somewhere at the end of the idea of a hallway. Slow, deliberate, matching my pauses instead of my pace. Whisper, hello. The word didn't travel. It just dripped to the floor like something spilled. I hated the sound of my own voice in there. I promised myself I wouldn't speak again. I found a dead fly on the carpet, gray with dust, legs curled in on itself like a punctuation mark. I found a coffee cup with a lipstick smear the color of rust. I found a printed sign taped to a pillar. It said, "Quiet please, therapy in session." There was nothing else in that space but yellow and hum. I tried the phone again. The time said 12:04 a.m. again. My battery was at 83% and had been for a very long time. I opened my notes app and typed, "I'm in a hallway and it won't end." When I closed the app, the screen showed my lock screen photo for a split second, the one of my apartment window at dusk, with the crooked streetlight and the neighbor's cat on the sill. For that split second, I felt the pressure of outside air in my nose, and then it was gone. I ate half the mint from my pocket. It tasted like paint. Somewhere the humming hiccuped. The lights brightened and dimmed in a ripple that moved down the hall ahead of me, like something big passed overhead and tugged the electricity along with it. I flattened against the wall. The wall was warm again. Warmer. I felt the whisper of an exhale against my forearm and pulled away. Lo, I'm just going to keep walking. I turned left. The hall kinked right. A patch of the carpet ahead was darker, not like a stain but like the color itself was deeper there. As I stepped onto it, the hum thickened. The air pulled at my ankles, the way ocean water tugs your feet as it recedes. I hurried off the patch and the tug went away. Behind me, the darker spot looked a shade wider. I passed a thermostat. The screen said 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Condensation beaded on the plastic cover as if it were cold to the touch. I reached out and the plastic trembled under my fingertip, like a muscle resisting the reflex to flinch. The temperature ticked to 69 degrees Fahrenheit even though I hadn't pressed any buttons. Shaky breath. I don't know how long I walked before I saw the first person. He was far down the corridor, just a square of darker gray against the yellow. I lifted my phone to brighten him. He didn't react. He was facing the wall. He had his hands flat against it. That was the shape of him, hands up, head bowed like a child praying to drywall. I said nothing. I stepped after him, calling him in my head without words. My shoes made the smallest sounds. The carpet changed from soft to granular, like spilled sugar underfoot. When I was close enough to see the back of his neck, I realized what was wrong. His skin didn't look like skin. It looked like the wallpaper. That same faint square pattern, that same thin gloss, as if the yellow had grown a person. He turned his head a quarter inch. The movement made no sound. The skin around his ear creased like paper, not flesh. His ear itself was printed on, a picture of an ear resting on a curved surface. He brought one hand down from the wall and pressed his palm to the carpet. The carpet accepted his hand like mud accepts a boot. When he lifted it again, there was no print. I backed away, one step, two. The hum rose in pitch, not an alarm, more like amusement. He put his hand back on the wall. He didn't watch me go. I ran. I didn't want to run, but my legs decided. The hall stuttered past in a flipbook, yellow, corner, yellow, dead plant in a plastic cylinder, yellow, a fire alarm with no pull handle, yellow, a closed door labeled storage that led to another corridor of yellow when I opened it, yellow. The hum pursued me. It was inside my skull, stroking the spot behind my eyes. I lost the map of my body. For a few seconds I was only the sound of my breath and the wet kiss of carpet on rubber soles and the taste of dust. I stopped, doubled over, palms on my knees. My phone's light painted my shoes. My shoes looked like belonging, like proof that I came from somewhere. I hated them for being so sure. Pause. When I straightened, there was a door 5 feet in front of me. A real door. A door like the one I had stepped through to enter this place. Beige. Featureless. I didn't think. I went for it with the pure animal certainty of a swimmer breaking the surface. The handle turned. The hum tucked itself under its tongue like a secret. I pulled the door open. It opened to the back stairs of my building. The exact angle of the railing. The window with the pigeon feather stuck in the corner. The dim streetlight turning the alley into a watercolor. I laughed, something raw, the kind of laugh that comes from your shoes more than your throat. I stepped through. The door closed behind me. I waited for the ordinary noises to clap back, traffic, someone yelling 2 streets over, the click of a cooling pipe. The alley gave me nothing. The building didn't tick. The air had the same used-up taste as the hall. I turned and put my hand on the door handle to make sure it stayed a door. It was warm. I checked my phone. 12:04 a.m. battery 83%. I unlocked it. The lock screen photo was wrong. The streetlight in the picture was on the left side of the frame now, and the cat on the sill was looking at me with a second face peeking from behind its first. I blinked, and the picture went back to normal. I went up the stairs, listening for my neighbors. No TV. No plumbing. No late laughter. The hum followed, casual as a tide. When I reached my floor, the hallway lights flickered in sympathy. My apartment door had my welcome mat, my scratch on the deadbolt where the installer slipped, my jaunty magnetic letter, J, even though my name doesn't start with J because the thrift store had only that letter and I thought it was funny. Inside, everything was where I left it. The couch, the crooked lamp, the stack of mail with the pizza coupons on top. I set my phone on the counter and touched the wall over the kitchen sink. The paint felt damp. Not wet, exactly. More like a breath passing through a mask. I showered. The water smelled like pennies. The hum nested in the exhaust fan and shook the mirror. When I stepped out, the mirror fog cleared in the middle before the edges, like a pupil finding focus. For a heartbeat I saw yellow in it, yellow stretching down a corridor that could have been behind me if my apartment were built like a bad idea. I wiped the glass with my palm. My handprint stayed too long. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the TV on mute, letting the bouncing ads pretend to be company. At 12:04 a.m. my phone buzzed. A calendar notification I had never set, quiet please, therapy in session. I tried to delete it. The delete button slid away from my thumb like a fish. Whisper, stop, please stop. The hum didn't stop. It sank to match the rhythm of my breath. By the time the window began to lighten, I was sure of two things. 1, the door would be there tonight. 2, the yellow halls had learned my name. The second night I told myself I would not go down. I would put headphones in and drown the hum with rain sounds. I would watch a movie with the volume high. I would cook something with garlic and butter and make the air smell like a kitchen instead of that. At 11:15 p.m., just as the pasta reached al dente, the power flickered. The stove died. The lights pulsed. The hum poured into the sudden quiet like water filling a mold. I went. I don't remember deciding. I remember the stairwell. I remember the narrow seam between the bricks widening as I approached, polite, expectant. The door didn't surprise me this time. It seemed almost bored, as if I were late for something that had been waiting since before I was born. Inside, the halls had rearranged themselves kindly. A spilled trail of staples led away along the baseboard, bright as fish scales. There were damp handprints at knee height. The hum wore a new overnote, a child's voice humming another melody on top of the first. I followed the staples. Somewhere to my right, water gurgled. Somewhere to my left, someone murmured just under the threshold where language begins. I rounded a corner and found a cluster of chairs stacked on a table, the legs splayed like the ribs of an animal. A sign on the wall read, "Break Room." The door into the break room was painted onto the wall. The paint was fresh enough that it gleamed. When I pressed my ear to it, I heard a microwave beeping, beeping, beeping. I kept walking. The staples thinned, then stopped. The carpet showed a shallow trough, like a path used for a very long time by something that did not lift its feet. I stepped into it and felt the floor bow a fraction, the way a trampoline bows when you join someone else's bounce. I began to hear my name. Not like a shout. Like a thought that someone else had and put down where I would step on it. It arrived in the pauses between hums. It matched my heart. I tried not to answer even inside my head, but my mind is a traitor. It repeated my name back just to make sure it still knew it. The halls heard and were pleased. At the edge of my phone's light, a person stepped from across corridor. She was wearing a white blouse and a pencil skirt and shoes with a wedge heel. The wedge heel had no scuffs. She smiled and lifted a hand, small wave, friendly, weary, like she had been expecting me, and this was finally proof that expecting helps. I moved toward her, whispering hello without sound. The hum softened to let me act like we were normal people meeting in a normal hallway. She turned and began to walk. I followed. Her stride was confident, knowing. The hum bent around her, respectful. We passed a window framed in metal. The window showed another hallway. Our reflections walked in it, slightly out of phase. In the reflected hall, she was looking at me with no eyes. Just skin drawn across, sliding a little with each step as if the wall behind it were breathing. I didn't look into the real hallway to see if that was true. She stopped at a door. Beige. Featureless. She pressed her palm to it and the surface flexed, taking the shape of her hand. The lock slid back with a sound like a sigh dragged over a grate. She looked at me. Her smile didn't change shape, but something underneath it relaxed, relieved, like a host finally seating a guest. I reached for the handle. My phone vibrated. 12:04 a.m. battery 83%. She tilted her head in a way that might have been pity. Small voice, will this lead back? She didn't answer. Her hand squeezed my wrist with careful pressure. Her skin was cool, not cold, and slightly damp, like the back of a sticker before you press it down. I pulled the door open. Air moved across my face, warmer than the hallway but stale. The smell of carpet cleaning fluid and old coffee. Inside, another yellow hall. But there was a difference, a small one. The hum here had been recorded and played back. It had edges. In the distance I could hear a copier starting up, warming, failing, warming again. I stepped in. The door closed. I turned to thank her, or to accuse her, or to say nothing at all, because maybe that was safer. There was no door behind me. There was not even a seam. I laughed again. It sounded like shoes. I began to walk. The halls changed the way a face changes when someone else wears it. The square pattern on the walls became rectangles, then circles, then squares again. The carpet turned out under my steps like a tongue. The hum gained layers until it felt like a choir. I could pick out individual voices in it if I concentrated: a child, a man whispering something technical, a woman telling a story that had no nouns, my own voice practicing my own name. I tried to remember my apartment, the crooked lamp, the welcome mat, the sill where the cat sometimes sat. The images slipped when I turned them over. I could no longer remember which way the streetlight leaned in my lock screen photo. I could no longer picture the J on my door or explain why I had chosen it. I could not remember if I had ever liked garlic or if that was something I had read about someone else. I walked until my legs became ideas. I leaned on the wall and the wall leaned back, lover gentle. I told myself I would rest only until the hum completed one full breath. I woke on the floor with my cheek warm and damp, the imprint of the square pattern pressed into my skin like a brand. My phone lay beside me. 12:04 a.m. battery 83%. The lock screen cat had two faces again and neither was a cat. Pause. If there is an end, I have not seen it. If there is a way back, it hides in the folds like a coin under a tongue. Sometimes I think I catch a smell, city rain, exhaust, the sudden metallic sweetness of the elevator cable in my building. I follow it and arrive at a wall that pretends it is a door until I blink. Sometimes I hear a conversation, 10 floors above me, 10 years ago, about rent increases and broken mailboxes. It fades into the hum the way a name fades when you try to say it too many times. I have stopped marking the walls. The scrapes appear before I make them. I have stopped counting steps. The numbers here have their own opinions. I have stopped speaking. The halls know the sound of me. If you find the door behind my apartment, if you squeeze through the seam and feel the hum settle into the grooves of your teeth, if you tell yourself you will just look, just a step or two, please, please. Whisper, don't. Because sometimes, at the far end of a corridor, I think I see the air move where a door ought to be. I run. I run until my shins feel like glass. I run with every version of my name pounding in my skull. And when I reach that spot, when I slap my hand against the place where the world should thin, the wall is warm, and it gives, and something behind it exhales as if content to have found me again. And I remember that the yellow halls are patient. They don't keep you by force. They keep you by offering you a way out that always opens into more of them. The hum is soft now. It matches me. I walk. I listen. I practice forgetting. Sometimes I practice remembering, because that hurts more, and pain makes a sharper map than comfort. If I ever reach a door that leads to the alley, if I ever feel night air that has not already been breathed, I don't know if I will step through. I don't know if I'd recognize the outside long enough to claim it. The halls call me by the name I had and the names I tried on when I was younger and the name I haven't learned yet. The carpet sighs. The lights blink in time with a song I almost know. I keep moving, one step, then two, my hand trailing along the warm wall as if it were the back of a sleeping animal, listening for breathing that may be mine, or may be the building that swallowed me. And somewhere, behind my apartment, there is a seam in the bricks, there is a door that wasn't there yesterday, there is a hum learning a new voice. 12:04 a.m., battery 83%. I walk, and the yellow waits, and sometimes it smiles when I pass, because it knows I am still here, and I think it always did. Story 8. The Boy Who Smiles in the Dark. The first time I saw him, I thought he was a trick of the dusk, a white smudge standing too still at the bend of my street where the sidewalk dips into shadow. It was late September, the air damp and leaf-sweet, and my hands were full with groceries. I glanced once, twice, and in the second look I understood that it wasn't a mailbox or a pale fence post. It was a boy, small, thin, and facing my house with a smile that didn't fit on a human face. Soft, I remember telling myself not to be dramatic. Kids play pranks. Halloween was creeping closer. Maybe he was waiting for a friend, maybe he was laughing at a joke I couldn't hear. But he wasn't moving. Not an inch. The rotting plank on my front step gave its usual groan. My door opened with the familiar stick, then the hollow thunk. I kept my eyes forward, pretending I didn't see him, pretending the smile wasn't widening, wasn't shining the way wet porcelain shines under a streetlight. Inside, I stacked milk and eggs and a loaf of bread on the counter. I listened to the house breathe, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking kitchen clock, the muffled wind tugging at our maple tree. I told myself I wouldn't check the window. I wouldn't. I checked. He was closer. This time he stood across the street, right in front of Mrs. Ellis's hedge, head tipped just a little too far, like a dog trying to understand a new word. His hair was oddly flat and dry against his skull, like it had been combed once and then never touched again. His eyes were too open. And that smile, it never changed. Teeth even and small, lips pulled back just enough to show gums, as if the expression had been painted on and left to set. Tense, I lifted my phone to take a picture. The screen stayed black. Battery at 62%, but the camera app refused to open. I tried again, black. When I lowered the phone, the boy had taken half a step to the left, still perfectly still, instantly closer to the gap in the hedge, as if the world had skipped a few frames while I blinked. I told myself to breathe, to wave, to say something normal. "Hey," I called, as light as I could. You okay? He didn't answer. His smile didn't falter. It didn't even twitch. Lo, do you need help? A car turned onto our street. Headlights swept across asphalt, across my lawn, across the spot where he stood, and I swear to you, I swear, the beams passed over him like fog. No shadow. No interruption of light. The car rolled on. The boy's eyes never left mine. My throat went dry. I shut the curtains in a way I hoped looked casual, then stood with my back to the fabric, listening to the soft rasp of my own breath. I waited, 10 seconds, 20, a full minute that felt like the length of a held note in a hymn. When I opened the curtains a sliver, he was gone. That night the house seemed to expand and contract around me. Every door had a new echo. Every floorboard translated my steps into messages I couldn't read. I brushed my teeth and caught myself checking the mirror for a face that wasn't mine, a small, white face behind my shoulder, smiling. Nothing there. I laughed at myself, a tight, humorless sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. I slept with the hall light on. The light didn't help. Whisper, at 2:13 a.m., I woke to the sound of a breath that wasn't mine. Not loud. Not labored. Just there, as if I had been sharing the bed with another chest, another rise and fall, for years and only now recognized the rhythm. My mouth opened before I knew what I was doing. Hello. The breath stopped. I couldn't move for a full 5 seconds. Then I did what children do. I pulled the blanket up to my chin because some animal part of me still believes cloth is a wall. The hall light hummed. A car on the highway side 6 blocks away. The house exhaled. When I finally found the nerve to look toward the doorway, there was nothing there. But the air had a weight to it, a coolness, like the inside of a stone room. I must have fallen back to sleep because I woke up to pale morning and the feeling of having been watched all night, gently, patiently. 3 days passed. I didn't see the boy again. I told myself that if it were truly dangerous, it would have escalated. The brain is a bad scientist. It forms its conclusions first and looks for evidence second. I went to work. I came home. I watered the fern. On the 4th day, I took the trash to the curb at dusk and remembered the first time I saw him, the angle, the light, the sweet rot of leaves. I even stood at the exact spot in my yard as if facing the same problem from the same place would yield a different answer. He was there. Not at the bend this time. He was standing on my side of the street, directly in front of my neighbor's driveway, perfectly still, smiling toward my porch. He was closer than before, near enough that I could have counted his teeth if I'd wanted to. His skin looked, wrong up close. Not dry, not oily, something in between, like a peeled grape left in the open air too long. His eyes were rimmed in a faint bruise blue, not from injury, but from lack of sleep, or lack of blinking. "Where do you live?" I asked. My voice came out flatter than I intended. "Lo, do your parents know where you are?" His head tilted another degree, a hinge pushed too far. And then, for the first time, he spoke. It was not a child's voice. It wasn't an adult's either. It was the thin sound a mouth makes when it hasn't used words in a long time, a dry hinge finding motion. "Do you want to sleep?" My lungs forgot their job. "What? Do you want to sleep?" My trash bag slid from my hand and thumped on the grass. He didn't flinch. A moth circled my porch light, circled again, then dropped as if it had flown into a cold wave. I swallowed and tried to match something ordinary to the moment. "It's late," I said. "You should go home." He smiled the same smile, the one that never changed, the one that seemed to belong to a mask more than a face. Go to sleep. The fact that I shut the door in his face felt like admitting defeat to something I didn't understand. I locked the deadbolt. I sat on the floor with my back against the wood. I counted my heartbeats. After a while, I crawled to the front window and lifted the corner of the curtain. He was closer, on my lawn, a few feet from the porch, head tilted, eyes wide, smiling. I slept on the couch that night with a kitchen knife under the coffee table. Tense, I told myself I was being ridiculous even as I chose a knife with a heavier handle because it made me feel safer. I set an alarm for every hour. At 1 a.m., nothing. At 2 a.m., nothing. At 3:13 a.m., the breath again, there and not there, as if the room were a lung and I was inside the ribcage. I sat up slowly and the couch springs ticked like a metronome. I looked toward the window. The curtain moved. Not much. Just enough to show a pale sliver of cheek and a long curve of teeth, and then it fell still, as if someone outside had pressed their face to the glass and waited for me to notice. I stood and the room tilted. When you are very afraid, the world becomes a hallway. It narrows until it can only hold you, your breath, and the thing that wants to be near you. I reached for the curtain, pinched the fabric, tugged. The window showed only my reflection in the room's faint light. No boy. No face. Only me, and yet, the glass was cold in a way glass rarely is, a deep cave cold, a morgue cold, as if something had been there long enough to lend the temperature of its absence. I didn't go to work the next day. I told them I was sick, which wasn't fully a lie. My body felt like a violin with the strings tuned too tight. I made coffee and watched it go lukewarm on the table. I thought about calling the police. What would I say? There is a boy who doesn't throw a shadow. There is a boy whose smile doesn't move. There is a boy who asks me to sleep like he's offering a gift with a knife hidden in the bow. That afternoon I researched missing children in our county. The photos blurred into one another, boys with cowlicks, boys with braces, boys in baseball shirts. None of them were him, and all of them were him, pale in the way a picture is pale. Night fell early, the way it does when you need more day. I turned on every light in the house. Light is not the opposite of dark. It is a thin fabric laid over it, and dark is patient. It will wear the fabric down. At 9 p.m., my doorbell rang. No one uses doorbells anymore. Phones have made them obsolete. The sound shocked the house, sprinted down the hall, and collided with the back door. I froze. The doorbell rang again. Whisper, a third time, softer, as if a finger were learning the shape of the button. I brought the knife with me. The peephole showed only my own fisheye face. I opened the door 2 inches, chain on. Yes. He was to the left, inches from the door frame, face aligned with the crack I'd made. He didn't move. His breath didn't fog the air. The chain between us felt absurdly thin, like a piece of jewelry pretending to be a lock. Don't, I said. I don't know what I meant. Don't be. Don't smile. Don't exist in the space where my life should be safe. He whispered, go to sleep. I'm calling the police. The smile held. The eyes didn't blink. Lo, go to sleep, and I won't have to come in. The chain rattled against the door, not because he touched it, but because my hands were shaking. I shut the door, slid the second deadbolt, and dragged the hall table in front of it, then a chair, then the old trunk that used to hold Christmas lights. The practical part of me knew it was all theater, a ritual to keep from screaming. The lights hummed. The refrigerator clicked. The house swallowed me. I slept in my bedroom with the lamp on and the knife on the nightstand. I dreamed in white. Not snow. Not paint. White teeth, white skin, white glare, white hospital corridors where every door was slightly ajar and every room held a bed that looked like mine. I woke to a sound, not breath this time, a slow, rubbery squeak. I knew it before I looked. The sound a finger makes when it drags across glass. My window. Squeak, squeak, squeak. I lay there, eyes on the ceiling, counting the intervals like thunder after lightning, like a game I could win if I reached the right number. I turned my head at last. The curtain was translucent enough to show the suggestion of a head behind it, round, too still, and at the height of a child. Panic, leave, I said, voice breaking. Please, please, leave. The squeaking stopped. For a full 30 seconds, there was nothing. Then, soft as a secret, from the other side of the glass. Go to sleep. I didn't scream. Screaming is a choice, and I chose the quiet that lets you hear the inch between danger and your skin. I stood up, picked up the knife, and went to the window. My fingers shook as I lifted the curtain. The glass was empty. But in the frost of my own breath, the night had gone colder than it should have. I saw it, the outline of a smile drawn on the inside of the windowpane, a cartoon curve with too many teeth, as if the cold itself had been taught a shape. I pressed my palm to the glass and felt the sort of cold that is not temperature but intent. I didn't sleep. The dawn was a rumor that finally kept its promise. At 7:10 a.m., I got in my car and drove to a motel 2 towns over, the kind with doors that opened directly into the parking lot. I paid cash. Room 12 smelled like cigarettes and lemon cleaner. I locked the door, shoved the dresser in front of it, checked the bathroom, checked the closet, checked under the bed as if I hadn't aged at all since I was 9. I stayed until sunset. Cowardice and survival share a face, and I wore it. As the sky went orange, I realized I couldn't live in a motel forever. I had to go home, to clothes, to bills, to the lie of normalcy. The street was quiet. My porch light glowed like a held breath. I carried the knife openly now. Let the neighbors talk. Inside, the house felt relieved, like a dog whose owner has come back from the store, like a place that had gotten used to me and didn't quite know what to do with the hours I'd been gone. I checked the windows. No smile in frost. I checked the door. No fingerprints, unless fingerprints can be smooth, unless they can be suggestions. I showered with the bathroom door open. Steam climbed the mirror. For a few minutes I was only water and heat and the animal happiness of being clean. I turned off the tap and the old pipes groaned to a stop. I wiped the mirror with my hand. There, in the clear oval my palm made, was a sentence illuminated from the hall light behind me, written in the condensation from the outside of the mirror, words that shouldn't have been written there because nothing but the room could have touched that side. Go to sleep. I didn't dress. I ran dripping to the kitchen phone. The police arrived 20 minutes later. Officer Vasquez walked the perimeter with me. We found no footprints, not in the garden bed, not in the patch of dirt by the back window where the hydrangea always droops. We found no smudge on the bathroom mirror except the ones my own damp fingers had made when I jabbed at the words as if I could erase meaning with movement. I tried to explain. She took notes with the look people wear when they don't want to call you crazy but have to place you in the world somehow. Call if he comes back, she said, sympathetic, skeptical. Keep the doors locked. The night after the police visit was the quietest of all. Silence has textures, you learn that when you've listened long enough. This silence was the kind with a thin skin stretched over it, a drumhead, waiting for the tap. Just after midnight, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. A third time that lengthened into a long blink. When they came back, the house had changed in the smallest possible way, the way a face changes when someone enters the room. The air felt occupied. I didn't say hello. I didn't move. I stood in the living room and let my eyes adjust to the lamp's gentle circle. The hallway looked deeper than it should, the bedroom doorway too black. I knew, the way you know a storm is near because of the pressure in your teeth, that he was in the house. "Whisper, I know you're here," I said to the hallway. "I know you can hear me." Nothing. Not breath. Not a footfall. Not even the courtesy of a creak. Why me? Nothing. Then, from the far end of the hall, from the black mouth of the bedroom door, a smile. Not a face with a smile. Only the smile. A crescent of small even teeth hanging where a face should be, aligned at the height of a child, bright not with light but with attention, pointed at me the way a blade is pointed. Slowly, carefully, it began to drift forward, leaving the doorway and taking up space in the hall, and as it moved, a pale oval assembled around it, cheeks, the idea of a nose, the overspread eyes without lids, and then a thin white body behind it, like chalk dragging its own outline across the dark. I backed toward the kitchen without looking away. He was smaller than I remembered and somehow larger, the way a nightmare knows how to be big in a small room. He didn't walk. He arrived in steps the world didn't take with him, closer each time I had to blink. "Stop," I said. "Please, stop." He did. He stood 15 feet from me, head tilted, smile set, eyes wide, as if waiting to be fed. And then his lips moved for the second time since I'd met him, and whatever animated that mouth arranged words with the slowness of someone threading a needle. "I don't want to hurt you, if you go to sleep." My knees wobbled. "And if I don't?" He blinked for the first time. It was slow and wrong, lids meeting like two people shaking hands for the first time. When they opened, the pupils were slightly larger. "Then I will smile until you can't keep your eyes open, and when you close them, I will be inside." "Lo, inside what?" He tilted his head the other way. "Inside your sleep." The refrigerator compressor clicked on. The sound was so normal it broke something fragile in me. I grabbed the knife with both hands and held it out. My arms were shaking. "Go," I said, barely more than air. "Get out of my house." He looked at the knife with mild curiosity, as if it were a spoon with a new shape. Then he took one of his non-steps and the space between us shortened by 2 feet without his feet moving at all. "Don't," I said. "Don't come closer." He didn't. He only breathed in, a quiet, eager sound that made my skin gather itself tighter around me. Then he whispered, quieter than the first time, "Go to sleep." I ran. Past him. Through his space. It felt like passing through dry ice, not wet, not cold, but a burning absence that made my eyes water. I reached the front door, tore the chain, threw back the deadbolts. Night lay outside like a promise. I stepped onto the porch, turned, and slammed the door. He was already on the other side of the glass. He didn't press his face to it this time. He stood a few feet back in my living room, like a guest who knows the rules of a house. He tilted his head, slow, controlled, patient, and then he raised his hand. It was the first time I'd seen him move anything like a limb. The fingers were too long by a little, or maybe every kid's fingers look long when the hand is still. He lifted them, one by one, and wiggled, a child's wave, rehearsed friendliness, and then dropped his hand back to his side. He waited. He smiled. The lamp hummed. I slept in my car that night 3 blocks away, tucked under the sagging branch of a sycamore. Each time I began to drift, I felt a warmth on my cheek, like breath through glass. I jolted awake to the empty windshield. I don't think he followed. I think he doesn't have to. It has been 3 nights like this. I nap in slices. I eat in sips. I watch my house from a distance, and sometimes I see the curtain in the living room rise a little, as if fingers I can't see are tracing the fabric's grain. Officer Vasquez leaves me voicemails I don't return because I don't know how to tell her that a boy who smiles is living in the spaces I can't lock. Today I bought blackout shades and a sleep mask and 3 kinds of herbal tea. I held them in the store and felt like I was choosing weapons. The cashier wished me a good night. Soft, I said thank you and almost laughed. It's evening again. The sky has the color of clean bones. I'm writing this at my kitchen table with every light on, every lock locked, the knife beside the laptop, the front door blocked by the trunk and the chair and the hall table, a fortress built of furniture and fear. I keep looking up at the doorway to the hall and counting the seconds between breaths. I can feel him at the edge of the room. That is the only sentence that is completely true. I can feel him. If I look up, no, I will see it, the first hint of teeth at the threshold, then the paste-white cheeks, then the eyes, unblinking and almost kind, almost. Whisper, he's waiting for me to stop writing. He's waiting for my fingers to still, for the lamp to become a soft circle with no words in it, for the house to collect its sounds and offer them to him. He is patient. He is small. He is smiling. And I am so tired. He wants me to go to sleep. I can hear it now, the way one hears the ocean in a shell, not in the room but in the space behind my eyes, his voice repeating itself as if it were practicing the shape of comfort. Go to sleep, go to sleep. I will try not to. I will sit here until morning and let the ellipses mark all the places where I almost gave in, where my eyelids sank and my head nodded and the world went gray at the edges. I will leave the knife where I can find it if that matters at all. The hall is darker now. Or maybe the pupils adjust. Or maybe I am a camera and he knows how to change the exposure without touching anything. If you find this, if you are reading, if you live on a street with a maple that drops its leaves in a circle the shape of a shallow bowl, if your bathroom mirror ever shows a message in condensation you didn't write, if a boy stands too still at the bend and smiles without blinking, do not invite him in with your attention, do not look too long, do not answer the door. Do not go to sleep. He is standing in the doorway now. I can see the curve of his mouth from the corner of my eye. I won't look. I won't. Tense, he just said my name. How does he know my name? He said it like he found it under a rock and wants to show me what else is underneath. I can't hold my eyes open much longer. The letters keep drifting, the keys feel far away, the room is narrower, the lamp is warmer, the smile is closer, he will say it again, and when I close my eyes he will finally have the door he's been asking me to build. If I don't finish this sentence, it's because I decided to fight sleep a different way, or because sleep decided to fight me, or because his breath is so close now that it is the only air in the room. He says there is a gift waiting if I just go to sleep.